G'day, guys. Good to see you all. Yes, another Sunday. Yeah, I was just getting my sort of, fucking haven't done my hair. Haven't had a chance to even basically have a shower this morning. It's just been a mad rush getting up. I said, I'll jump onto. I usually sort of go and shave a bit, and I did shave just early and did the other things. Yes, housekeeping. Yes. Toilet had an intro from me. Yeah, let's see what's been happening. Unfortunately, I didn't get up early enough to see Pim's sort of live chat. But there's always later. Alexander, good to see you, mate. T1's always here as early. Yeah. And being very nice. Yes, please hit that like button, please. Even dislike. If you don't like me, dislike me, you vegetards out there. It all counts. Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're probably right, T2. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yes. He's a bit like that. He's vain, Where is fucking vain? I haven't seen him for ages. Is he hiding or something? G'day, mate. Good to see you. Yes, it's going to be busy. I've got 2 streams. I've got also the Euro Live one later on. I don't know which part of the world you're in, whether you're going to be asleep or not, but yes, I'll be busy today. So I will get back to Pim. I just haven't had a chance. I just noticed her email this morning and I'm going, I better reply back, tell her what we're going to do. So I've got a few themes, but I'll let her pick which one she wants me to talk about. As I usually do, I just give them a list. I've done the same thing with Barton. They'll just pick the one they want. So that's how it usually works. I don't mind discussing any theme. Yes. Probably want to go easy on Bird Brain this week, Harry. You're going to be nice to him. It's very unlike you. What's happening? Oh, he's still shedding feathers, is he, from last week? Oh. So you're going to hold back. You don't want to sort of end up with a naked bird. G'day, Trouble. And Luke, good to see you, mate. Yes. He's a bit of a wanderer. Yes. Oh, was that Bart's? I was Viddy Mouse. Yes. I just noticed the end of that. Well, we're all busy. We're all, back and forward. I don't mind you just coming back and forward, just normal. G'day, honest. Yes. Yes. I was getting my oxalate juice ready. Coffee. So I'm still waiting for 11 to go past because I usually break my fast at about a bit after 11. So, yep. Bit of oxalate juice in the morning. Probably not the best way to break a fast, but anyway, should probably grab the brie, but just very inappropriate. Me, better show T2. He was invisible. invisible. So, and we beating down, 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 down. Oh, so far. Of a bird and a monkey. Okay. What am I playing? I'm the stupid monkey. Yep. Okay. Somebody needs to play that role. Sorcery? Have we got a member of the Church of Anorexia Vegana here doing some sorcery? Maybe the witch is on the prowl. You never know from Trawley. Are those pieces of chocolate? Where? What do you see chocolate? The books. The books and that's a laptop there. And the other one's to that side. Yep, over here. Right there. That's a device used in mapping. No, nothing like that. I just have high quality instant. Don't have a machine. My mate's been trying to say, if you need a machine, I'll get you one for you. He'd give me one for free, but I'm just a bit too lazy to do the barista thing. I used to go around to my sister's because she did a barista course and she was pretty good at it. So I could get a half decent coffee. But she's moved to Western Australia, unfortunately. So, and ice cream. Yeah, I had some ice cream yesterday. Yes, I did spoil myself. I actually went to one of the guys at work was retiring, and so I had a Friday thing as well. Yes, quite a few inappropriate foods and quite a bit of inappropriate booze. I can tell you, I haven't had drinks since the lockdown, and it's been quite a few months. It's sort of I had four ciders, big pints, and they usually double in alcohol, so it's like having 8 standard sort of beers or stuff like that. It just, God, went to my head. So, and I forgot to actually have my B vitamins and stuff like that. So, yeah, I didn't even have that as a backup. So, I'm going, oh God, I had to slow down a bit just to sort of get and then because I walked home from the city back to North Hobart. It was a good walk, a couple of Ks. It sort of cleared it out of my system. So I was pretty much sober by the time I was only a bit tipsy, but still, I usually have a good constitution at handling it. But when you haven't drunk for quite some time, it just, God, it goes to your head. Yes. Well, here it's still morning. So you must be in New Zealand, possibly. Yes, here it's not even 11 yet. It's 11:15, nearly. Oops. Oh, thank you, StreamYard. I just need to get back to my position. Hello, and hello. And be nice, T1, or Harry will reprimand you again. Yes. We'll get the whip on him. Morning, zombie. That's how some of my friends call me, Hazard. Actually, one friend, she used to call me Hazard. good reason. She knew me too well. I hope I can trust your position on the animal poofer. I got my parents to start using more lard in the kitchen. It's conventional through. Yep. Look, they will not, If you look at the Greeks, ancient Greeks, actually the favorite animal food for the Spartans was pork. They had a lot of pork dishes. And Sardinians, some of the longest lived people, they cook in lard. My family from my father's side who lived in the mountains, they also cooked in lard for many years. It's only in the modern year after the Second World War, a lot of them moved to the lowlands and adopted, olive oil, which isn't the most optimal. And longest lived people, some of the longest lived people in the world have cooked in lard. Okinawans, they start the day with pork, they finish the day with pork. So, and as I've pointed out in the past, ages ago, I actually showed, I can't remember whether it was on one of Bart's chats or whether it was on one of my live streams where I actually showed that lard has much lower aldehydes, even when you cook it at high temperature, compared to tallow, butter, ghee, let alone all the other oils. So you want to rip your lipid rafts to bits. Those bilayers have high aldehyde foods, so very toxic to cell membranes. So, lard has some of the lowest that it produces, because everything that oxidizes, everything produces some byproducts. That's why we do fasting for autophagy to, clear out all the debris from basically just living, breathing in. It's all a matter of we breathe in oxygen, we strip all those carbon molecules off the foods that we eat. We oxidize the carbon. We combine those hydrogen ions with the oxygen, and we create metabolic water, and we exhale out all the carbon dioxide as a byproduct. It's a beautiful, simple system that we've got. And, there's reactivity in all that, the production of energy. There's byproducts that come out of that. And that's why we use, and that's why our sort of low carb diets and all that are much better, because they allow you to basically abstain from eating, a bit of fasting, a bit of time restricted feeding. It's possible. You're not in the trough eating sugar every 2 hours. So that's the advantage. And anything in excess, if you're on steroids, the thing is with animal foods, it's very hard because of the satiety. You basically just go, I've had enough. But the reality is that any food, if you oxidize it in vast amounts, if you're able to force it down, which you can't because you get that satiety signaling with animal foods, which you don't get with sugar, refined sugars in particular. So those are the sort of differences. But you're not going to go wrong with lard, because it's low in reactive sort of byproducts. And that's the most important thing. If you're cooking different foods, what are the reactive byproducts that are coming out of that? Also, it's much lower in deuterium. I've been telling you guys for ages, which means that the sort of metabolic water you create in your mitochondria is going to be much cleaner. It's less likely to do damage to your nanomotors, that are your capacity to do ATP synthase. And the more of those nanomotors in the long run you can retain as you're getting older and older, the more energy you'll have into old age, the more capacity to repair you'll have into old age. So it's a virtuous circle, so you need to keep that in mind. Well, even conventional lard is better than some of the other crap, some of the seed oils and all that. So, and there are plenty of populations that feed their pigs anything, they'll throw any sort of scraps, So don't get too wound up about those things, and most of the stuff that most people get wound up on, as you know quite well, and Paul Saladino loves to quote, are all the rat studies. And I've pointed out to you guys before, rat studies have poor conversion of LA to arachidonic acid. So obviously they end up with more LA in their system because they can't deal with it properly. Rats don't have a very good fat metabolism. It's very hard to get them even into ketosis. So they're just not a good model to basically use and extrapolate for our own health. It's nonsense. As I said, rats are good to basically point us in terms of hypothesis generation, in terms of basically understanding things like what could be toxic, but even there, the capacity of different animals to detox can vary as well. But it can at least tell us that, certain things can be potentially toxic. And so to avoid, in a sense. But it doesn't tell us really a lot of other things. Very little lectins in coffee. It's very minor. Look, the anti-nutrients in coffee is very little. So even though it's not an optimal food, it's not something that you should basically. I basically have. Some people can't detox caffeine very well, and they usually have they should avoid it. I have sort of the genes that I've pointed out in the past that I've shown that have the capacity to detox 4 times faster caffeine plus alcohol as well. Some pathways is used, but it's not a license to basically drink like there's no tomorrow of any of these sort of things. But it's a small minority that gets possibly affected a bit adversely. But really, let's not over exaggerate these things. Very important. Luke X. Is that his new name? Yeah, look, I've been the same thing. I've sort of avoided it because I put on a few kilos while I was at home, hitting the ice cream and things like that. And then I'm going, oh shit. Then I started doing a bit of walking, a bit of weightlifting, and started cutting back on that, just keeping it to a single day, the Saturday. So yes, can't give up everything. Life would be far too boring, too restricted. I'd feel like a monk. I don't want to be a monk for the rest of my life. But at the same time, for good health, you must, try and be as close to a species appropriate diet as possible. Yeah, it's doing a lot that to many people. Funny thing is, with my workplace, what they were doing, because they were refurbishing the building. So what happened was they actually came in and actually made a few additions. So now that people are going all back, they don't have enough space. And so I've been given the option whether I wanted to stay at home. And I said yes. So I'm here until December, which is nice, which I don't mind. It's convenient for them. But it also means while I'm at home, I can work longer between a longer strain of hours, and I can actually take longer lunches and stuff, which you couldn't do at work because it's, it just doesn't look good. So I've got more flexibility. So, in a sense, like a sort of nearly like a self-employed person, in a sense, that sort of flexibility, which is, I still have to do my hours, but I'm actually more productive at home. And I think they've realized that, because I'm not chatting with anyone. There's nobody around. so you just get on with the work. So I tend to, I've, really am sort of asking for work because I'm running out of work. So I don't think they really, I think that's why they targeted me for staying at home. They said, oh yeah, we're getting more out of him. So yes. Yes, it's very hard if you don't have a job. It's going to be a different, shit, going to get this out of whack, and my spitter out of whack as well, that it distorts the audio. So yeah, it can be an issue for a lot of people. That's true. That's underhanded. You mean he's been a bum since the 80s? Is that what you're telling me? God almighty. God, the knives are out between you two. Yeah, look, the benefits in Australia are quite good. People are getting, I know people that are basically making a bit more money under our schemes of money being thrown around compared to when they were actually employed. So for some people, it's been quite beneficial. But Australia's a bit different than the US in that regard. So businesses finding it hard. Yep, exactly. A lot of small businesses are not going to recover. I've actually adopted a new sort of policy as Harry Serpanos, and even my mate and a couple of others. And what we do is, as you know, I went to a new person to do my hair this time around, get my hair cut. Even some of my shopping I go to different stores, different places, deliberately, so I can spread money around to different businesses to support them. I think people should do that. I've reduced the amount of spending that I do in supermarkets deliberately, and sort of patronaging smaller outlets and all that deliberately to try and help them, because those smaller businesses employ a lot of people, and you've got to go around and support them to keep them afloat. So to keep those people in a job. So I've been doing a lot of that. And I encourage other people to do it, but it's up to you, You should be locked down forever, bird brain. Oh, that's nasty. You mean caged? Caged? Strapped? T1. Yes, you are. You are definitely on my channel. You are. You're an animal. Yes, plenty of friends here. Yes, I know a lot of people have hit the booze in these periods, and it can be problematic, And I say to people, look, if you've got families, you need to sort of be a bit cautious about that. The sort of example you demonstrate to your children, especially if you've got children, they need to see a person who's strong, confident, and able to manage adversity, because life is full of obstacles, and you need to basically be able to cope with them, and the children need to be able to see that to learn. There's enough suffering in this world. We don't need to add. Deep sleep is vital for depleting the cells of excess deuterium. Yes, it is. Regulated deuterium levels plus Carnival, perfect, exactly. The other thing is it's also very important with remember you're getting signaling in terms of the pineal gland and melatonin. And that actually affects signaling throughout the whole body. So that's an important thing, the light part as well. So don't neglect that. Early in the morning, you should get out in the sun as the first rays of light come up. I would say anywhere between around about 2 minutes is enough. It signals the brain that basically daylight is emerging, and to start down regulating melatonin, which you want in the daytime. You don't want to be drowsy. And then you basically want to, because what happens is a lot of people are indoors, until then they get into a car, then they drive home to work, and they're indoors all the time and they're not providing all this signaling. And so they don't have that boost that they need. As the sun comes up, you get that. You don't look in the sun. Please don't look in the sun. But as you're outdoors, and so you're getting that early light, that spectrum of light that's moving from the near from that infrared type, orangey type, to getting some blue light in, and that just signals, let's push our cortisol up. Let's wake ourselves up. Let's get ourselves going. Let's energize ourselves. Get the norepinephrine up. You're getting all these sort of hormones that are basically getting you going, so to speak, for the day, and that's what you need. And then towards the evening, as the sun's going down, you want to get that signaling as well, that orangey type spectrum between the green. So you've got blue, green, orange, then the red spectrum. So that transition in between that sends a signal and says, okay, it's time to start getting melatonin up. Because if you're getting it to about 10 o'clock or 10:30 and you're not feeling drowsy, you're not producing enough melatonin. And melatonin is very important to protect your brain into old age. Really important. And that's where you need blue blocking glasses. You need blue blocking glasses, remember. And also you need long sleeves, because unless you've got light bulbs, I've ordered some light bulbs and I'm going to be replacing all my light bulbs. I should have done it long ago. I've just basically been turning off the lights in the evening and just my blue blocking glasses, and using, reducing the blue spectrum on my, monitors and TV and stuff like that. But it's a hassle because you're going, luckily because I've got good levels of retinol in my diet, I've got good night vision, so I can go around in the dark nearly. So, but at the same time, occasionally even with night vision, you can bump into things, if it's really in certain parts of the place, which could be really dark. So it's useful to have that sort of lighting. But also if you're going to have people over, you don't want to be basically fucking up your melatonin production as you're moving into the night. So really important, that as well. Even, I am going to do a nexus on that, on light and the thyroid, but that's coming up, to look at that sort of side of things as well, which is sort of will nuance a bit some of the thyroid issues that a lot of people are suffering, even though they've, adding right nutrition and all that. Light does play a role, my dears. Yes, nothing like a bit of quantum biology, but it will be made very simple. There'll be no complications in that explanation. We used lard as a frying medium. You could taste and smell the difference. Yeah. Oh, look, things get cooked in lard are really nice. I stir fry stuff in lard. It's where's Harry? I'm not here for Tom Cruise. Hey, God. Am I too young for you? Oh, thank you. I'll take that as a positive comment in an indirect way. In about a month's time, I'm going to be officially 54 in a month's time. So, oh God, yes, I'm a September kid. Brazilian yellow, yeah, it was lard. One of conventional mass-produced brands. Yeah, no idea about the brands over there. I hope you've researched it, Lucas. The last study, study, PowerPoint, and it was not rat study. Are we talking about paw here? 3, it was some type of Pacific Islander study. Okay, rat boy confirmed. Yes, I mean, I actually made, what was it? The last study that Paul pointed out, Pacific Islanders are not rats. Well, Pacific Islanders consume a lot of coconut oil. So they use about, something like half their calories come from coconut products of one sort or another. There are some tubers, but not a lot, as many people think. They have also small piglets. Their main food on a lot of the islands are small piglets. So, because a lot of the small islands, they're not very conducive for goats, sheep, or they're just the sandy islands. They're just not. So piglets are much easier. Also, piglets could be transported by the Polynesians on their ships for long distance, because they could throw them scraps and they could feed on the scraps in long voyages. That's why most of all the Polynesian islands are just full of small piglets, traditionally. So their diet has been one which is high in pork-based products and coconut-based products of different levels depending on the island, and a bit of fish. And it's usually all very close coastal fish, smaller, not larger. So that's pretty much when you look at the Polynesian diets. I don't know what his take was, because I haven't seen much of Paul's recent stuff, so I can't really comment in that regard. But also there are some differences with Polynesians, which I've pointed out in the past. They can handle far more medium chain triglycerides as well in their diet, which if we were to consume the same probably would give us, let's say, loose stools. So we're not as well adapted, even though as children we consume quite a bit of medium chain triglycerides from breast milk, but at the same time as adults we don't. And definitely compared to even children, the Polynesians consume far more because of the level of coconut products that they consume. Plus, they've got an adaptation to salicylates. It doesn't affect them. So there's a whole lot of different reasons. Yes. Honey. Yes. I'm thinking of a different sort of honey, not the one that Paul's thinking of. When I was downing 48 to 72 ounces of coffee a day. Shit. After going carnivore, I only have one 16-ounce serving a day. I just usually have, and it's just basically a flat teaspoon, just a flat teaspoon, and I just basically have 2 coffees a day. That's even though I've got very high detox capacity, which would be the equivalent 4 times fast I can clear the actual caffeine. So that would be the equivalent of a half a coffee a day for most people in those terms. So I don't even, it doesn't even affect me. I don't even feel a boost or anything. It's just the taste. Just probably another way of actually me getting some milk products into me, like cream and milk than anything else, just to give it a bit of some sort of background. I sometimes, if I'm having milk in the evening, like a glass of milk, I put just a pinch of coffee in it just to give it a bit of another taste. In the past I used to put chocolate. I don't do that anymore, so I use the coffee a bit. So that's what I use it for that sort of taste. I don't use it. It's not for the sort of other things. Okay. Yeah, look, people react very differently for a whole lot of, oh shit, sorry, I just lost my spot. StreamYard decided just to basically jump. Thank you, StreamYard, luckily I didn't actually unselect you because I would have really lost my spot now. Found it. Okay, yes. Humans evolved from rats. Yep. And yep, that's true, but that's irrelevant. A lot of animals evolve from rats. Tigers, lions, and all that evolve from rats, from a sort of a rat type creature. So what's your point? That's not a point to be made. In terms of physiology, what we can say with rats is if something's going to be toxic to rats, it's going to be toxic to us. If it's going to be toxic to a rat, it's going to be toxic to a lion or a tiger, or a bull or a cow. So that's all we can extrapolate. We can't extrapolate nutrition just because we've got common lineage. We evolve. That's what evolution is. We evolve, we change, we adapt, and we develop new methods to, utilize different types of nutrients in the environment. So that's what happens over time. And so things change. We lose our cecum and it shrinks down to an appendix because we don't ferment fiber anymore. And that's why when you consume too much fiber, you really get bloated, you really get constipated, and you really get a whole lot of other issues. So, it's an irrelevant point in that regard, these sort of things that people make. I mean, most of the mammals in the ocean are all carnivorous because there are no plants, So it's only some crustaceans and all that may consume some vegetation in the environment, but the overwhelming majority are consuming little crustaceans that have eaten that grass, and the fish are quite carnivorous. And they're all, the dolphins and the whales are quite carnivorous, and they are mammals as well. So what's the point? So we all evolve. We may have a common ancestor, and even the rodents, the current rats and mice, have a common ancestor, but they are not the original, so to speak. That has died out. So maybe it was more carnivorous than we know. We don't know. We've got no proof. We can speculate, but that's about it. And I haven't seen any isotope analysis because the problem is a lot of them are sort of fossilized. Very hard to do isotope analysis to see what they really ate. So what is the sort of the nitrogen content? So is it nitrogen 15, which is basically more carnivorous, or is it nitrogen 14, which is more plant-based sources of protein? So we can't do that analysis. So, and we shouldn't speculate because that's not science. Remember, we're empiricists. We basically have to have, beyond that, we can, maybe at some point from archaeological, anatomical, or whatever, we may be able to find more evidence, and from that then extrapolate something. But at this stage, it's just all speculation, and that helps no one. And let alone, it's useless because animals do evolve over time and exploit different niches and different food types. So it's an irrelevant point. Just in case you heard that from some dubious vegetated person, that's how I would reply to them. Alcohol is so overrated, is it? You'll have a lot of disagreements with a lot of people, I can tell you. Yeah. It's probably not so necessary. It is a poison. Let's put it that way. Even the body recognizes it as a poison. It will prioritize alcohol even over glucose, which is, or especially fructose will get out of the system much faster because it's the next poison after that, and then the glucose, and then going down that way. But everything has some reactivity. Let's not forget, even fat, everything has some reactivity, creates some byproducts. The difference is fat is a cleaner fuel, but it's not 100% clean. So everything has some reactivity. That's why it's good to fast now and then and clean out some of that debris, that junk. Daniel's abstaining completely. It's actually good faith. Is it? Yeah. Okay. I know your email has that name. There you go. Coffee and whiskey are essential for good health. Well, if it works for you, good for you. See you in 30 years. Shell, it's always a pleasure. Yes, old Blinky. Yes. Yes, I think Mr. Year's with us. We won't. Yes, he's a good boy. He's a good lad. He's working on moving to more carnivory. It's hard when you've got a lot of the family members that have got a certain way or family tradition of doing things, takes time. I mean, I know from my Greek background, people consume a lot of coffee. And so it's very much ingrained. It's probably one reason why we clear, we've got the genetics to, like the Italians, to clear the Arabs and a lot of other populations that have consumed coffee for a very long time, to remove the caffeine toxin out of the system much faster. It's usually, if you look at the populations around the world that usually have these genetics at much higher level percentage of the population, it's for that reason. So coffee is not very good in that regard. So if you don't have those genetics and you sort of, when you have your coffee, you sort of feel it, that means you probably don't have the genetics. Or if you feel it just a bit, you're probably a halfway house. If you don't feel it at all, it means you've got something similar to me. It just doesn't, gets cleared out so fast. You don't really get much of a, any bang for your buck, so to speak. So that's one way of sort of trying to, work it out. I like it. I have a job. I kill rats. Yes. Like this one? I couldn't. Oh, sorry, T1. I couldn't help myself. We've got to keep it lighthearted. A bit of science and a bit of lightheartedness, Yes. People. Yes. And zombie, the worst thing about lockdown is my kid's dad moved in with us. Oh. And he works from home, LOL. I miss my peace and quiet. Oh shit. Yeah. That can be a bit difficult, testy. Another one off the bean sauce. Yes. Call it what it is. Good oxalate juice. And look, it is bean. It is a bean. It doesn't have a lot of oxalate, compared to many other foods. It's a very low oxalate food, coffee. But it's really the caffeine for some people that's the problem. And even lectins, even though it's a bean, even though it is a bean, It has very low lectins in comparison to many others. It actually has a good quantity compared to many other foods. It has a very good quantity of niacin. So if people want to avoid like niacin, yeah, but it's that the balance. On the other hand, you may avoid the flushes, the niacin flushes, but on the other hand, um, it's going to be an issue. If you overconsume, if you don't have the right genetics, could be an issue that way as well. Not having the ability to clear things. Yes, so really important. Sure. I asked Pim this. I wanted to ask you as well. Is cooked meat more bioavailable than raw, rare red meat? In terms of, yeah, it is in a sense. A lot of things become a slightly more bioavailable when you cook it. You can actually extract a lot of more nutrition. This is why one point in terms of both energy, in terms of some, and it varies as well. So you're releasing more nutrients, you're getting more nutrients, but what you're losing out is you're losing out in some of the things like potassium. You're losing out in things like, these are the differences. So water, sort of the water-soluble vitamins can reduce, especially if you overcook things. You can lose a lot of the fluids. The other thing is you lose a lot of the enzymes. And that's why I sort of combine both cooked, rare, and raw. And most of my meat, I don't overcook it. It's rare. So I consume most of my meat as rare, unless it's pork, which I cook slightly right through, because there's always issues with pork. And on the other hand, I usually also, when it comes to some meats, like red meats, I will have them in their raw form, sometimes smoked, sometimes cured, and sometimes just plain raw, so thinly sliced raw beef as an example, and just put a bit of salt and have it with a bit of hard cheeses. So that's to get the enzymes, because as we get older, the amount of transcription of enzymes, the amount of enzymes we can actually produce diminish. Everybody's actually so wound up about probiotics. Probiotics is nonsense. I've been telling you guys, you're wasting your money on probiotics for ages. The only time, if you've been forced to take a dose of antibiotics, and the best probiotic then to use is basically kefir, because it's a live, it's a live culture that you're putting back into your body to increase the numbers. But the last thing you want is a lot of bacteria, especially in your small intestine. If you've got a poor, sort of stomach, not enough stomach acid, stuff like that, you can end up with SIBO. So most important things are enzymes. Enzymes do work. I remember I've been telling you, enzymes go around, proteolytic enzymes go around clearing up debris, clearing up damaged proteins, in your joints, all over the place. So actually on an empty stomach, occasionally consuming proteolytic enzymes, the ones that I've shown you before, are really good, because we don't get enough. And that's why raw foods, in particular like cheeses, stuff like that, they do have enzymes in. Raw milk, a lot of enzymes. You don't lose the enzymes. That's why I buy raw milk, for that reason. So there's a lot of raw foods are important for the enzymes that you get in particular, especially as you're getting older. But at the same time, I like cooked meat, but I don't like it overcooked. Sometimes there are foods that I'll have medium rare, and sometimes there are foods I sort of like. Beef I can have rare, I don't mind. When it comes to something a bit more gamey like goat, I like it cooked, where there's only a bit of pinkness in it. I just prefer goat like that. I don't like goat really rare. It just doesn't sit well with me. So there are foods that I will cook more than others, so it varies. So goat and lamb I'll cook a bit more. Pork I'll cook right through just for the potential risks. And when it comes to beef, I pretty much have it rare, sometimes even raw. But it's probably the only meat that I really will go completely raw on. Um, I don't really like fish raw. Undercooked fish I can eat, but I don't like overcooked fish either. But undercooked fish I can consume, but I don't like it raw. It just somehow, and even when I undercook it, my fish I'll put some butter on it, let it melt, and put some lemon juice just to to give it that sort of flavor which fits my palate. It's really my palate. It's not based really on what's the best way of having it. Probably raw, but can I have it? No, I can't really manage it. Sorry, it's just oops. Yes. So there's palatability is one side, obviously, but that's the real thing, you know. And the reason why people cooked humans cooked in the first place, or hominins cooked 1.5 million years ago, was basically to extract more energy and some of the nutrients out of the food. So that was the reason for it. But when you do that, you lose the enzymes. You lose a number of the other things, particularly when you're older. You really need those. Obviously, nowadays people can just buy proteolytic enzymes and use a supplement. But yes, those sort of raw foods do play that role. Some of the dairy raw foods as well, and some of the seafoods as well, and other things. I still have, I still consume raw oysters. I probably consume my oysters raw rather than cooked, but I wouldn't do it in the northern hemisphere, especially in the US. There's a lot of cases where people have died because of bacteria in the raw oysters. So there is a lot of risk in some parts of the world where, Australia, New Zealand, those parts of the world, water is very clean, quite pristine, and those sort of risks don't exist or very minimal. So I haven't heard of anyone in Tasmania or New Zealand dying from raw oysters. And a lot of people, that's how primarily they consume them in these parts of the world. So, but it's always a problem with some parts of the world when it comes to crustaceans. Dried, denatured, and charred meat is much more bioavailable. Yeah, charred, black, probably not. It's a bit too much overcooking. Yes, but even slightly, the doses we've got good detoxification, even better than rats and stuff like that. So and they were given massive doses to basically induce problems in the rats. So you can't extrapolate from that. You can only say, well, at this dose, the rat will get these diseases or these problems. So, these stomach cancers or whatever. Remember, they literally giving them massive doses of this sort of stuff day in, day out for months. So something that humans would not naturally do. So let alone the dosage is ridiculous. Exactly. Go raw anyway. No, I wouldn't go completely raw. No. It should be a balance. I believe it should be a balance between, like our ancestors did. They had a balance between raw foods and cooked foods. They combined both. I think that's a much healthier way of of living and eating and all that. And also raw meat tends to also not lower the pH to the same level. So cooked meats tend to lower the pH, and also fermented, like fermented meats tend to seem to do it far more in that regard. But it does vary between, these sort of things are not linear in a straight line. There are so many variations. Everybody can use an example. Oh, I've got this example. And they're right. They do. But I usually just say it's a much more healthier to sort of have a balanced carnivorous diet that includes a number of different food sources and in a number of different ways. You'll get far more nutrition that way, and less issues. Let's put it that way, less issues. Single food things like just beef only, I think some people can get away with it because they've got a lot of reserves, and for the last 10 odd years or whatever, they may have been working through those reserves, so less of a problem. But I'd like to see people out beyond 10 years, 20, 30 years or whatever. We don't have any longitudinal studies on anything really, and that's the problem, that we're relying on anecdotes, which all we can do is, as I said, we can point back to multiple generations and say, what were they doing? What is the N15 isotope analysis showing us? Very high levels of animal food intake, and those are the only things we can extrapolate. So there's a lot of things we've got a lot of question marks on. Zombies going, well, stop it, raw. It's still not natural. Just eat the rear and right off a living cow. Radical? You mean jump and bite? Well, that would be yes. I can see myself going. Going like a damn, falling all over the place, like going like I hope Luke got that. That was for you, Luke. All that nonsense. Yes. Jumping at the rear end and biting something. Yes. Luke must have got that. I know he's pretty fast. Do ask again if you need another shot. And yes. Look, raw foods are good in terms of enzymes in particular. So we shouldn't discount raw foods. But, people can have raw foods like dairy raw foods, which most of them are fermented, in that regard. So it's not, let me just bring that in a bit lower. There it is. Yeah, so you just got the notification. How crazy is that? Yeah, look, I'm actually looking at mine, and it's just my notifications are all over the place as well. I don't know what the bloody hell they're doing. They're absolutely atrocious at the moment. And I think it's even more widespread than even, I think, yes, they may be targeting certain communities, but I think it's starting to get wider because some other communities and other people are starting to complain, like there are other YouTubers that are doing archaeological stuff or other things like that. And it seems like, I think, while Bart, what he's been saying, that YouTube's really, involved in a lot of this anti-carny, low carb stuff, and a lot of other things, the PC type nonsense. I think what Bart said once, that what they're trying to do is turn themselves into some sort of like homogenized sort of like Netflix type, where they're just focused on a certain niche group of, the nonsense, it's just the sort of the comical, all the skits, people doing stupid things or whatever, just that. And getting the advertising dollars behind that and getting rid of all the other undermining all the other sort of YouTubers that are out there doing, knowledge stuff, sciencey stuff, physics, chemistry, all these other things, because a number of these other people are finding similar effects. There are a lot of people out there, because I subscribe to a number of other channels that are involved in, looking at physics. I mean, one guy, he's a British guy that actually, I don't agree with everything that he says, but he's interesting, and he had a recent thing on the Lebanese issue, and he was just looking at from a purely scientific, trying to say, that what was in it, as an example. So, he was looking at sort of the chemical makeup by looking at the actual, that the redness that emerged in the cloud and stuff like that. So it was going through all this sort of stuff. So there was nothing controversial, absolutely nothing controversial, and he got demonetized. And then it takes, as Bart knows, it takes days and days, and by the time people have moved on. So even if they remonetize it, it's a waste of time, because people have moved on to the next video. They're not going to go back in many cases. Very few will go back. So you've already lost the momentum and the capacity to monetize it with that momentum. And so people are going, well, I'm doing all this work and then I'm not getting anything out of it. And it's particular people that are basically living off, to some extent, of YouTube and social media and stuff like that. It's not my case. I mean, I've got a day job, so it doesn't bother me as much. But, I mean, I could be spending it, doing research on my investments, as an example, so yeah, I could, some people say, well, you should get something out of it. Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, it's not my major motivation, as most people know. I know a lot of you keep on telling me you want to send me money, and I keep on telling you I'm not as interested. I may have to at some stage do something, but, just to, I said to my mate, maybe I just allow them and then I just gift it to some charity, do something like that. Yes. Or go and buy a better camera and go and do a few things around the city for you guys. I don't know. Who knows? Let's do something like that. Not that I really need a new camera. I could probably still, my camera in my phone is pretty good anyway. Yes. I like cooked raw, rare, preserved, anything really. Yeah, look, whatever suits you in that regard. If you're getting enough nutrition and you're not having any issues, so do what works for you. I don't think there is one format. There are different genetics between people, and I've always said, look at what your ancestors did. Go back, check your ancestors. If you come from the British Isles, as an example I'm giving now, and many of your ancestors would have basically consumed a lot of cod liver. So these people would have got good levels of selenium, good levels of iodine, good levels of, the fat-soluble vitamins, in particular vitamin D and vitamin A, retinol, from these animal foods. Well, these people, if they're not eating those foods anymore, they're going to have deficiencies much quicker than others, because one, the ability to convert beta carotene to retinol has been reduced because they consumed, shitloads of cod liver in the past. So it's just simple, So your genetics, if you look at the genetics of these people, the beta carotene to retinol conversion is much lower in those populations, which means basically another reason why the vegans that, consume a lot of beta carotene or do carotene smoothies or stuff like that, you see them, their skin goes orange because they just can't convert it. It ends up, accumulating in their skin. They just can't convert the damn thing. So it's a very unhealthy thing, because these sort of beta carotene, if it gets damaged or oxidized or whatever, or degraded, it can become a pro-inflammatory thing, not healthy. So these people are basically causing themselves additional inflammation. It's probably one reason why all those studies, like the German study and many others, on that I've shown in the past on vegans, vegetarians having higher homocysteine levels, there is a factor there. Plus, they're not eating certain species appropriate foods. Not enough choline, not enough the B12. If they've got the SNP, not enough riboflavin. If they've got that SNP like me, which is a small percentage of the population now, it's about 10% on average. These are the sort of issues that can emerge in a population. So you should consider your ancestry as well. So that's an important facet in that regard. Yes. What about Jared is? Good. He must be preparing his food still. Old grandpa takes his time, doesn't he? Bloody hell. Nope. Eating host will kill it. Nope. I'm not sure about that. Harry, is it right on the money? My parents have terrible night vision, or even low light vision, probably, low retinol, not having enough fat-soluble vitamins. That would be a reason. That would be the primary reason. There can be other reasons as well. For instance, in terms of light, too much exposure to blue light, which is the blue light spectrum from either EMFs, electromagnetic fields. There is the blue light spectrum component. I mean, it's a wider component, but part of that, or the EMF, plus from LEDs nowadays, which are monitors, which are very blue light, tend to basically, they degrade DHA in the eye, which basically means that you are slowly damaging your eye. It's got like some brain cells in there as well. The eye is sort of connected straight through to the visual cortex. So that's part of it. Also, melatonin plays a very important role in repair, especially if you're because it's produced. Remember what I said? It's produced in those folded parts of the mitochondria that I've shown you guys before, and so that could also have an effect on the capacity for repairing the eye and keeping good vision as well. So yes, it's a multifactorial, but retinol is one of the big ones. Yep. Let me try and understand this. Nope. Eating the host will kill it. I'm not sure about killing what, but we don't have to kill the meat again. Okay. Oh, you mean about raw and fire once the calories already? Okay. Well, people have been doing it for 1.5 million years, so I don't think. But look, they haven't been overcooking things, because in many cases they will take the whole animal, they throw it over the fire, and gets cooked, and so it gets cooked inside, like boiled or whatever. And then they'd open it up and sort of cut it up and share it amongst themselves. So it was never overcooked. So I don't believe in overcooking meats, pretty much, or fats. Not a good thing. But let's not, exaggerate things a bit too much. Our ancestors did preserve dry out, cook some meat to last until the next kill. That's right. Yeah. So I mean, they dried out meat like jerky, and stuff like that, and things like that, to preserve it. So these are well-known things. Okay, so I think it's a mix. It's good to have a balance and a mix of different things for a whole lot of different reasons. So, yep, that's true. That's true. It is in drying out in the sun rather than cooking it. Cooking will spoil. You have to put it in the fridge. That's true. I agree with that. But at the same time, cooking will extract certain level of nutrients higher than raw, and also pushes down the pH a bit more. Remember, you need to get over. I hope you're not in the group that goes, it denatures, because some people say, it denatures. Well, do you know what stomach acid does? It denatures all proteins. So get over that part. That's a myth. It's an absolute myth, denatures. That's not the problem with heating. Problem with overheating is damaging the lipids. It's not the proteins that are an issue, it's the lipids. Those lipids, especially if they are things like PUFA type, things like that, that's where the problem lies, especially, mono to some extent as well. So don't overcook for that reason. But at the same time, in animal foods, there's, the way in the bilayers, the fats are actually located. They're actually far more stable compared to plants. So plants, you can put out a steak for an hour, it won't go rancid. You can basically bust some sort of, plant type, so you can to get an oil out or whatever, and then if it's outside, it will go rancid from oxygen because it's just more sensitive. It's got more bonds where oxygen can actually hit and turn it rancid, so it can actually oxidize it far more easier. That's the only difference. So, and most when it comes to plants, they are high in PUFA primarily. In a less stable form as well. But I mean, probably the safest one I would say is macadamia nuts. Probably the safest. There's a couple of others. There's the one that the Samburu people also consume that doesn't have a lot of plant-based PUFA. I'm trying to remember the name now. God. Anyway, it's a certain nut. If you go back and look at the one of my chats that I did with Bart on the sand people and stuff like that, I do mention that nut, but I can't remember it now. You can get it out of South Africa. Anyway, let's move on. Must be having carny brain fog. All the alcohol that I had this week. Yes, some preserved meats need to be cooked to be palatable. Yeah, look, there's a whole lot of reasons. I mean, yep. Pemmican. Well, pemmican was actually, the fat was actually slightly cooked, so it was sort of a rendered in a sense and then combined. So, there's a lot of variations on way people do things in that way and then dry it out to reduce the moisture, which can cause a lot of the problems for bacteria and other things to, so there's a lot of things. There's a lot of intricacies when it comes to these sort of preparations and how you do things and all that will vary the results. So Lucas has felt bad because he usually has been eating fried stuff. If it's in seed oils, it's very, very bad. Remember, 4 to 6 years to clear that shit out of your cell membranes. Not a good thing. And I did take an astaxanthin and a low-dose vitamin E and all that when I went to this function on Friday. And I did have some of that sort of stuff, which I shouldn't. I sort of regret it after, but at the time you sort of have a few drinks and then your brain doesn't work. God. Yes. Okay. Yes. Polynesians bring piglets to America. No idea. I know they all basically fanned out from Taiwan. The original inhabitants of Taiwan are the Polynesians. There are still some people there that have still got the same genetics. They're a minority within the Chinese sort of Taiwanese community, but they still exist, and that's where they all came from. And if you look at all the islands of the majority, the overwhelming majority, there may be a couple here or there that don't have piglets on them, but the overwhelming majority do. So, and it's one of their favorite foods, pork. So, And they've been consuming that over multiple and multiple generations. So have we. I mean, the main fat that was basically used in North America was either tallow or lard before seed oils appeared. So they're being used throughout Europe and many. If you go to Hungary, for instance, Hungary is one of the biggest consumers of pork. They love pork. It's part of their national dish for the Hungarians, and, multiple generations have been consuming that way with no problems whatsoever. And remember, pork has the lowest deuterium levels of all land animals. The lowest insulinogenic effect. So when you eat pork compared to beef, steer, or goat, or lamb, or any of the sheep forms, whether it's an old mutton, makes no difference. They all have a much higher effect on insulin than pork. It has the lowest. So it probably explains why some of these populations that consume some plant vegetation, all that, have a lower insulinogenic effect because of, one, the glycemic load of some of these plants that tends to be more low carb or whatever, combining then the actual pork, it's less problematic. Yes. Also probably explains their size as well. Yes. Can be useful in early age to grow. That's insulin. Oh, thank you, StreamYard, for losing my spot. Yep, found it. What did he make? Not sure. I must have missed it. Okay. Is 8 coffees a day going overboard? Nothing. You never do anything overboard, do you? It's nothing extreme on your end. God almighty, 8 coffees. Fuck, you must be jumping around like a bouncing toy. You're a bird toy. Yep, yeah. Bloody hell, that's a lot of coffees. Fuck me, mate. Yeah, I know. That's too much coffee. Even if you've got good genes, I wouldn't, I'd still, yeah, way too much. Interesting details on my ancestors. My dad mentioned that his great-grandfather was native tribal, refused to wear any type of shoes or whatever. Great. If you look at all the monks, like the Buddhist monks, they walk around barefoot. Great. You get rid of positive ions and you take in negative ions from the earthing to the ground. Very helpful. It reduces platelet aggregation, and it's been proven. There is good science on that, where it's on other mammals, but they've put probes inside to basically show that when they earth these animals, they've done it, I think, even with some apes as well. It works with all animals, no difference, because we've got all the same electrical, similar sort of structures, blood vessels and all that. The actual clumpiness, stickiness of things in the blood vessels reduces. Really good. You don't need medication. I actually got, remember I showed you this last time, I mentioned that I got those strips. I've been wearing now one of those strips to earth myself when I go out walking and stuff like that. So yes, really good, really important, really good to reduce platelet aggregation in your bloodstream. So, and reduce the stickiness. Plus, he would have been on a native diet, would have been primarily, seasonal fruit and primarily animal foods. Like a number of the tribes that have been looked at, and most of the plants they would have used, they combine as fillers Some of the tribes, one of the tribes in there actually only eats once every 3 days. That means they fast so every 3 days do they have a meal. So they abstain from eating. So there are variations, and probably genetics as well, that are basically adaptations that have emerged in that society over a very long period of time. But yes, I would say that look, up until very recent in a human evolutionary history, there is, grains and stuff like that weren't part of our diet. And before 1.5 million years ago, even tubers were not. Well, you can't have a tuber because if you don't deactivate, you'll get very sick. Some tubers can be poisonous, as we know. So that's why they cook them, to deactivate a lot of the anti-nutrients and the poisons in them. Especially the poison in the skin of potatoes, as an example. So if you don't cook these things, tubers, so prior to 1.5 million years ago, there was no even possibility. And you can see that from the chimps, the savanna chimps, the chat that I did with Bart, quite clearly. They're in a savanna environment because of war conditions, where humans were cutting down all the forests and created a savanna environment in West Africa. But these Senegalese, chimps, they adapted and started hunting. The females that primarily consumed a bit more vegetation than the males, and also used to poke and did no hunting of their own, used to basically get a lot of the actual termites and stuff like that in their diet. They switched to hunting because they didn't look for tubers, they didn't look for anything else in the environment. Didn't go in the small forest area. They started hunting these small little critters that were very much higher in fat, because they have much higher fat stores. As I've said, women have higher fat stores. They require more fat than men. So, and the female apes are exactly the same, because we've got common ancestry. So all are very similar. The males are very low in fat stores. Females are much higher in fat stores. It's just those are the genetic differences between the sexes, and we can see that in both the ape kingdom and ourselves. So, as I say to people, get over it. That's the way we're built, and so it's really important to understand that most of species, when they will eat another species, because they can't access, it's only herbivores like cows, like that, will basically use multiple chambers in order to ferment things. But even they, at the end, all the protozoa, the bacteria, all the other small organisms that consume the fiber from the plants, then in the last chamber, which is an acidic chamber like our acidic stomach, that's where they basically take all their nutrition. The only thing that they get is short-chain fatty acid from the fiber. The rest is all, and this is why things like dairy and stuff like that has more medium-chain triglycerides and more short-chain fatty acids. In particular, goat dairy, is more like much higher in the MCTs. Again, for similar sort of reasons. But at the end, they're a carnivore. The last stomach is a carnivorous stomach. Sugar is very rare in the environment. It's only modern technology that's been able to extract sugar. It was seasonal and very rare. And that's the reality. None of us are really suited for sugar. A bit now and then in a summer, in a seasonal period, our bodies, especially if we're not putting any cream on our bodies and we're going out in the sun and we're taking in some UV, and that UV is depleting the deuterium, the high deuterium foods that sugar are. And so it mitigates some of the deleterious effects of sugar to the mitochondria. Very important. So it's these sort of things that we need to keep in perspective and in our understanding. And so going back and looking at our ancestral, most of the populations were animal based. Where the variations exist is whether, your ancestors consume more, larger ruminants or smaller ruminants or more seafood, or these are some of the nuanced differences where you may have some slight genetic differences in adaptation over a number of generations. That's where you basically, when you position yourself closer to your genetic ancestral type, locality on the planet, if it's a coastal locality or an inland locality where it is, and look at some of the history of your people or peoples and stuff like that, and try and understand a bit of that. That's when you will end up with far more optimal health on even the carnivore diet. And that's why we see all these variations between carnivores, because some of them are more suited for certain foods and some of them are less suited. And so that is really important. And people sometimes don't take that into consideration. Remember, I've always said you need to basically have a genomics or ancestral approach to eating. Very important that you understand where your origins come from. You will be better in the long run. You will feel better and you will be better as a consequence. Okay, I ranted a bit too long there. Most Aboriginal Australians refuse to wear shoes to be connected. Refuse to wear shoes to be connected to the land. Okay. Well, a lot of in the tribal areas, yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, the ones in the city slickers from Sydney, there was, I can't remember who actually was, a Paul Mason. Don't quote me. I can't remember who actually mentioned. No, I think it was Lustig. I think Lustig actually mentioned in one of his, anti-sugar type things that he does, the anti-fructose stuff. I think it was. And he actually mentioned about a group that had actually gone to, or he was in the conversation, one of the two, had gone to the bush, to the outback, and pretty much went back to, like hunting kangaroos and stuff like that, and sort of went back to sort of doing it more ancestral stuff, which was low glycemic load type things that were available in that specific place, and also a lot of hunted animals and some fish and stuff like that. And all their diseases, like diabetes and all that, all corrected. Even though they weren't even doing barefoot. That's a bonus. But, corrected. When they went back to Sydney, they went back to their old ways, all the diseases came back. So, a lot of these things, the more you optimize things, like you earth yourself, you get into circadian rhythms with a planet, you signal, because we would have been getting out of our caves in the morning, seeing, getting that early light. Then we would have prepared ourselves. Our cortisol would have gone up. Our energy would have been ramped up by our body to go out and do the hunt. You need energy. So we would have ramped up the energy production and all that. So that is a normal way. And by the midday, you would have basically eventually got something or killed something. You would have probably cut one of the organ meats and all that and shared it amongst the guys that actually, a bit of liver here and there, or a bit of blood as well to get some electrolytes and stuff like that. So they would have done all this sort of stuff. Then they would have taken back the animal back to the actual small tribal group, which I think the smallest sizes were about 30 odd people to a bit more. And pretty much, and that's another reason why a lot of tribal groups practice a lot of what is called, like giving like daughters to another tribal group. It's not only the alliances, but also that would have been healthy because it would have moved the genetics would have created much more variability, which was healthy. So it's a lot of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of things that you can take out of a lot of these sort of things. But really important that people, and that's a perfect example with the Aborigines, how immediately their health just went 180 degrees the other way. So they went back to their ancestral foods, a complete reversal. And that is the take home message, guys, that, you know, if you do things which are species inappropriate or follow along a course, you will suffer for it. You just will in that regard. So, yeah, exactly, sure. So it's just, look, nowadays it's just a bit less convenient. And the environment isn't as clean. There's things out there that you could step on and cut yourself, and it's not as if you're going out in a more cleaner environment. Plus, there are risks of infections as well. In a cleaner environment, less risks. So I've sort of, by using this other method, I can earth myself without, potentially getting a puncture of something that could be, dangerous. Yes. Covering made sick, believe. Just sort of moved a bit too. Need to move forward. Exactly. Sit outside. Enjoy that sun. That's a good thing. So really important to do that. I do it a bit, but not as much. Look, yeah, it's winter here as well, so it's not practical. Let's put it that way. So in summer, it's usually different. If I'm basically like on a beach, I'll walk in the sand. I just hold my thongs and in my hands and just literally walk on the beach. So yep, flip. Yeah, flip flops in my car. Yes, yes. I think that if you walk into establishment barefoot, they may look at you funny and they may tell you to leave the establishment. Yeah, I know. The world is very different than what it was. Yep, that's true. I think I showed something ages ago. That was one of my videos that I did with Bart, talking about the lack of lactose persistency that some tribe in South Africa, and they've basically for years, for multiple generations, they have basically fermented. And basically they drink their milk sour. It's a sour milk, so it's an acquired taste. But some people like. Look, I actually like sour milk. I don't mind, like sour cream and stuff like that. I've actually even cooked with sour cream. Can create very nice tastes. But that's me. Mhm. Yes, look, sometimes if there's a lot of genetics from potentially coming from a lot of different areas, it's probably advisable to do a genetic test just to find out exactly what your background is and certain genes as well. You're right, he's really sucking up, isn't he? God almighty. Incredible. Oh, well, you could You could hope you get reincarnated back into a lion. You could modify yourself. Get one of those lion suits. Give it a try. Be adventurous. Oh, God. Didn't even spell brain properly. God almighty, mistyping. Yeah, he must be on the juice. He must be on the juice. Yep. Yes. Probiotics can be a problem, you know. There we go. We need enzymes. We don't need probiotics. Actually, I noticed Mike, what's his name? Mike, what's his bloody name? I'm trying to remember now. Let me find out. I think it's high intensity health or whatever. Yeah, high intensity health, you know, Mike from that. He actually recently actually said that he's 3 years older than his genetic age. He had sort of admitted that he was basically, you know, staying up very late and stuff like that. That can do it to you. But he actually mentioned something which was really interesting. He actually poo-pooed probiotics. It's the first one of those, you know, the more commercial type out there that actually poo-pooed probiotics, which is really good because he actually mentioned one that actually has certain anti-inflammatory properties, and he said you should only get specific types which are enteric, which is what I've been saying for a long time, enteric, that can bypass the gut and actually will populate. They're not enteric, they don't populate, it's a waste of money. And they should be specific, which is what I've been saying, you know. There is one type that actually increases you know, your basically semen. There's another one, two bacteria that will actually increase your lactose persistency capacity. There's a number of things out there that do all these sort of things, and I've talked about them, but I haven't done videos yet because, you know, I've got a day job. But I will, you know, I probably have to speed that up a bit now because some of these guys are starting to switch on to this sort of stuff, which I've known for nearly, you know, 5 years or 6 now. And these guys are just now starting to realize that probiotics are a waste of money, and they just go, you just poop them out, you know. And so they're starting to realize that you need enteric type. It's a bit, remember the other one that I show you last time, which is one that actually populates, which is basically also combats dysentery, you know, that I used because it's a German one from the First World War, soldier of the First World War, that basically it's a German brand that basically populates and basically protects you from that. Also, it reduces, if people like have done plant-based and have got things like constipation and all that, it reduces constipation as well, this same bacteria. Go back and check. I can't remember which week I actually did that. But some of them are starting to switch on and realize that you need these sort of things. But targeted, not all this, and they have to be able to get past the acidic stomach. So, you know, some of this information is starting to get filtered out with some of these people. They're starting to switch on to this sort of stuff. Most of them are clueless. They're still basically prescribing, you know, probiotics with people that have got basically SIBO, which is basically, you know, how do you get rid of SIBO? You've heard me heaps of times. Acidic stomach. Make your stomach acidic, and it will clear out the entire small intestine of bacteria. You know, the overload. It's primarily people that are eating too many plants. Simple as that. You know, people that are recommending plants and more plants. And this is another reason why, because what does red meat do? It increases your acidity. When it hits your stomach, it signals the stomach to produce more acid. Because that is why we get a pH of 1.5 we had, because we were scavenger carnivores, we basically consumed these sort of foods. So we had very good pH. We didn't have stomach issues, So when we start going, that's why when you go to an ancestral diet back, things started normalizing again. For obvious reasons. There are certain people that have got other reasons why they may have a H. pylori infection they need to deal with and not be able to generate, because H. pylori has a capacity to suppress acid production. That's one thing. The other thing is they may have problems with their gallbladder, gallstones, stuff like that, not producing sufficient bile, because bile also helps to basically clear out, together with the stomach acidity, reduces the stuff coming in, and the bile usually clears out the small intestine, so you get a bit of acid that comes through, and it sort of normalizes it with the bile, and then it's sort of, because bile sort of reduces it to a certain level, but also sufficient enough to clear out the small intestine, and so till it gets down to the, what is it called, the ileum, the valve at the bottom, to so that's pretty much it eliminates a lot of those sort of problems. People are just eating inappropriately. This is why another reason why people that are on a standard diet, they may have other issues, but if they're eating very little plant matter and they're just eating refined sugars and they're engaging the Randall cycle, they're pushing up their blood lipids, they're basically pushing up their blood sugar levels, their insulin levels, they're doing all the bad things to their blood vessels, to their organs and stuff like that, creating all these growth factors and stuff like that. But you never hear them bitching about stomach problems, big stomach problems, because they hardly ever eat anything with fiber, or very little. Probably the only fiber they get is from some of the chips, some of the things like the fries that they have. So they're not getting a lot. So they tend, but what the problem is, they're not getting sufficient nutrition. So they're damaging their gut, their colon in other ways. They're creating leaky gut and all sorts of issues because of some of the breads and shit like that. But it's really the people that actually think they're doing the right thing and consuming a lot of plants, like 5-10 cups of plants a day, they are the ones that really are just in a mess with their gut. They, especially if they're doing raw, diverticulitis amongst the vegans and vegetarians is much higher than the general public. The so-called people thinking they're doing the right thing. It's also much higher in women as well, because women tend to consume more fiber than men. So let that be a lesson to you, ladies. Bloody hell, it does. More creamier. Oh, much nicer. Yes. Yes, much nicer. Where are you located on the planet? Absolutely nothing. Sushi's fine. Yep. Whatever does it for you. Yeah, I actually like smoked salmon. Really nice. I get raw smoked salmon. Yeah, I actually do like it that way. In that regard. There's a lot of comments here. Let me just. Yeah, look, I'm not a wine vinegar. I use basically I as far as seasoning and stuff like that, they've got a bit of a hermetic effect. If it's not in a large amount, it's less of a problem. Those sort of things. So I actually made a comment recently. I know that there was a video that Pim did on iron overload, the guy that was there. And I actually, once you get off standard diet and stuff like that, and you get on a proper species appropriate diet, that problem eliminates itself truly, because you've got the right nutrients, micronutrients, as cofactors for those enzymes to work properly. And that's the important thing. One, you need less enzymatic support to break down animal foods, which is one thing. The second thing, you need also less a number of vitamins and minerals. You need less things like thiamine, half the amount of thiamine, because carbohydrate metabolism requires far more. You need far less things like magnesium, because again, carbohydrate metabolism uses more. It's all these things. For carbohydrate metabolism, there's far more metabolic waste and more nutrients, and most of these foods tend to be nutrient poor. Difference is people had some carbohydrates in the past, but they combined them with a lot of animal foods, and that's why they didn't have these problems. There were some areas that did, especially people in the cities that had moved away from rural areas that had high levels of malnutrition and other issues associated with that. Very poor people in the 18th century, 19th century, and stuff like that. But generally speaking, if people were closer to an ancestral diet, they had less problems. So that is pretty much it on that part. Yeah. A lot of people did that sort of stuff. Yes, they did know. So do bird lives. We've got Birdie here, T2. His life matters as well to some, not to many, especially T1, not. But, you haven't tried it in the raw yet? If you've been living under a rock or something, trouble. Don't start with him. Do not start with him. That is your first and final warning. I'm kind of obsessed with tuna. Yeah, I sort of like tuna as well. Yeah, it's one of my go-to sort of meats, fish meats. Actually, it's good in. Look, if you think about it, it's a really good. It's good in selenium. It's good in iodine. It's good in tyrosine. So it's already and it's got good in zinc as well. It's already got a number of the nutrients that are very good for your thyroid, and you've got a thyroid issue. So, but you remember your sleep patterns are also important. You need to fix that. That's another factor in your thyroid thing. I will make a video on that. Yes. So keep that in mind. You prefer your meat warm? Me too. Winter. I can do raw and other stuff in like summer, but in winter it has to be warm. Yes, trouble. You need to be definitely brave. Be adventurous, like Shell. Just go and ask Shell. She'll teach you how to be adventurous. No, we can't do on humans experiments. That's wrong. I know it's a joke, but it's wrong. It wouldn't get past the ethics committees anymore. But when it comes to frogs and birds, it's a different thing, isn't it? You boys. Keep your distance. Yes. I don't know what you do with that, but I won't go into that. Don't think it would fit into the bird somehow. Uh, is iron overload from red meat an issue at all? No, it isn't. Problem is, people eat a species inappropriate diet and cause issues in proper metabolism, iron metabolism. So there are a number of issues in that regard. But one way of actually really reducing very fast, rapidly, if you've got something like that, is turmeric. This is another reason why many Indians in the subcontinent that consume a lot of curry type powders and stuff like that have a lot of is endemic iron deficiency for that reason as well. Yes. Amongst the vegetarians. So it's a combination of basically not eating enough animal foods and also some inappropriate things for those people. The majority of the people around the world is iron overload is a very rare thing, you know. So it's usually the other way around, not enough iron for a number of different reasons. But if you've got some sort of, like even people with hemochromatosis, many of them live in long lives, eating meats and stuff like that without any problems. So there's still a lot of murkiness on that in terms of good studies pointing us exactly. But if you want to, there's let me just go to the comment that I made on PIMS. And PM Johnson. Let me just find her. Probably faster looking for one of her posts. Yep. So where was it? This one. That was about a month ago. Shows how bloody behind I am on some of my video viewing. Share my screen. That was this one here. The sort of high ferritin levels. And as I pointed out, in a case study in humans, not a rat study, very important, shows that turmeric can reduce iron absorption in a dose-dependent manner, but overuse can cause anemia. And this is the study. And anybody wants to read it, I'll put it there so you can get it, access to it in that regard. And so, and this is basically, it's sort of a case study and stuff like that, and looking at the ferritin levels and how a dose-dependent level of turmeric can reduce it. And this is the remainder of the stuff I said. If you were to use it to fix a problem, use a small amount and recheck every month over 3 months until you get into a sweet spot. So if it's really an issue for you, and this is a generic thing that I'm saying for everyone, it's not for carnivores, it's because people have for different reasons. And I said I agree with the insulin nexus of problematic iron issues, and yes, it is related to insulin. Another reason to kick the sugar addiction, and then you don't need the turmeric option. Another reason why anemia is endemic in many parts of India due to the high consumption of turmeric in curry powders, and in particular amongst those on a plant-based diet. And the study has a conclusion. Turmeric supplements is increasingly common. Humans presenting with iron deficiency anemia should be queried about supplement use. So this is basically in a clinical setting. They're actually saying the doctors should be querying their clients whether they're basically using high dose turmeric. The ability of turmeric to absorb intestinal iron may lead to it being useful in the status of iron overload, such as hemochromatosis, and hemolytic anemias, such as sickle cell disease, sickle cell anemia that some people have. So basically, that was my comment in regards to that, about these sort of things that you could use. So technically speaking, if you had that and it was a concern to you, you could sprinkle a bit of turmeric on some of your food, and that should sort things out if that is a big issue for you. Yes, I'm still waiting on Lucas to present his little bit of comedy. We need a bit of comedy. Blue rare is raw enough for me when it comes to beef. Yes, we know you like it rare, mate. Bird brain even likes it rarer. Is a bigger concern. Many of the liberated Jews from the concentration camps quickly died when they were fed. I guess it was given the carbohydrates that would have changed. Yeah. Look, what happens is you can cause an electrolyte disturbance. It's an electrolyte issue, and insulin can be very much a problem in that state of affairs. So that's why this is, sort of when you fast for long, there's sort of refeeding, the refeeding syndrome that actually happens. That is really a dangerous thing. It's also an issue amongst, I'm trying to think, people that are like bulimic and, or people that have really got, like anorexia. That's it, an anorexia, that have really avoided food for a very long time because they've got severe anorexia, and sort of the refeeding that can happen if it's not done in small amounts. It can actually cause this refeeding syndrome, or potentially death from it and stuff like that. So it's really, really risky when you do that sort of stuff. So and that's what happened, because a lot of them, remember that it was based on the Ansel Keys research that he actually did back then, that where he reduced the calorie intake. He gave them a very low protein, very low fat, and when he restored the sort of the calories, these people normalized, and so he assumed incorrectly that all you need to do is just give them more carbohydrates, and that fixed the problem. But that was for a short-term period of these conscientious objectors, and it was calorie restriction. It wasn't starvation. These people were suffering starvation, which is a completely different situation. So, when you gave them high insulin, basically has a water retentive capacity. And if you don't have enough sodium, you can dump a lot of the other electrolytes. You can really make a mess. And, if you dump too much potassium out of the system and stuff like that, basically your heart stops working properly. So these are the sort of dangers that they weren't aware at the time. And so that's how a number of people died. And then they learned that if they gave them small amounts, they could, so sort that out. Yes. So, yes. Mr. Heat, they consumed thousands of calories after they were living on 300 calories a day. Yeah, exactly. It's just too much. Yes. Yes. Yeah. The refeeding syndrome is a real thing. But it's also basically due to insulin also and electrolytes. It has to be done properly. Even the guy that actually did, the longest fast in the world, 300 and what was it, 86 days or whatever, the person was gradually brought back with sort of things like soups and bone broths and stuff like that, and slowly sort of put back onto normal food over a number of days. So yes. Now, it wasn't very high in fats. It was primarily because the experiments on the conscientious objectors that Ansel Keys did, he did basically, it was low fat, lower protein, and a lower amount of carbohydrates. And these people really went weird after 6 months. Some of them basically were eating outside. One bit another guy's ear off. Another one went out and started eating grass. Some of them really went wacko because they didn't have enough fat, enough nutrients. When he gave them back a whole lot of, he didn't calorie restrict them, gave more the sugar back, they actually basically sort of stabilized. And he took from that, he assumed that it basically, it was just a caloric deficit, that these people, were behaving in this bizarre way. But, that's all he looked at. Because for them, it was basically, okay, we've got all these people that are malnourished in Europe. How much do we have to give them? And what is more economical? Can we ship? It's very hard to ship a lot of fat out. It's because at that time there were the only things that they could actually ship out was grains and seed oils. That's it. So refined sugars and seed oils. Two toxins. That's all they could ship out to Europe. Yeah, they were quite in a quite a bad state. I mean, I've seen some of the photos and some of the videos that some of the soldiers took. So, not that we're not talking. Look, the military took some photos as well and did stuff like that. But I look at at the stuff that actual people, soldiers that were there. Actually, the soldiers were so disgusted. And so when they actually then captured, after they'd liberated the first camp and saw what the Nazis had done, they were really harsh on the German prisoners of war after. It's understandable. It's human nature. I mean, when you've seen people do depravity of untold levels, obviously the soldiers are going to get really pissed off. And that's what they said, that they really, really were angry with the actual German, in particular the German officers, for their, how could they allow this to happen? This sort of barbarity. So, which it was, genocidal sort of stuff isn't the, it's not the nicest people that do that sort of stuff. And it's probably one thing that Germans today still have a bit of guilt. I usually say to my German friends, don't, because it was people of the past that did these things. But it should be a lesson to all of us that, we should avoid these sort of things from happening again, this sort of level of madness. That's what happens when we go to extremist politics. We can descend into that madness again. That's the danger. We can be swept up and not realize. And if you go and talk to the older Germans that were brought through the camps and saw these people in the condition that they were, those people were very much anti-war. It's the reason why Germany for a very long time has had a very strong anti-war culture. Japan the same. That while they had a peace constitution, all that. I mean, there are some extremist elements that are starting to raise their heads again in those societies. sort of with militaristic ideas and, power hungry, but they still a minority. I don't think they're going to get the same traction as they got in the 1930s in the population. Population is much more better informed nowadays for these groups to get the same level of traction. Okay, what is your opinion of high meat? It's fine, not a problem with it. I sometimes make my own. I don't really get I'll be honest with you, I don't really get a high. I know people say they get a high, but I've never felt one. So am I strange? I don't know. The only thing that I have heard people say is that it may be the high histamines, but that would happen with cheese as well, because I consume a lot of cheeses, like blue cheese and stuff like that, which is very much fermented and very high in histamines as well. And I don't have any problems with that. I eat shitloads of blue cheese. I love it. I can literally sit there. I mean, even our gorgonzola, where we make our sauce, my mate, on the yesterday, that's, very fermented, very blue cheese inside, very high in histamine. Never had an issue, but I haven't had really the high. Maybe it's people that have got a leaky gut and it gets through. They haven't really resolved some of those issues, and it gets through, and it basically maybe giving them some sort of, I don't know, to be honest. I've never had it. Maybe different genetics between people, that they can actually tolerate different levels in different ways. I've got absolutely no idea, because I talk to people about sort of fermented foods and all that, and some people, swear by it on the internet that they get these highs, and I'm going, how the fuck I'm not getting them? What's wrong with me? And most of my friends don't get them that consume this sort of food, and I'm going, and I know even my mate, Sean, he got really heavily onto the kefir like me for a while. He never had any of those sort of, elevated sort of. So I've got no idea. To be honest, I really don't have any idea. Is it a placebo effect for some people? Is it some genetics? Is it potentially some unresolved leaky gut and get in it and creating a reactivity, and they feel that, ooh, there's something, I feel a bit different. No idea. Can't help you on that one, because I haven't. Because there are no studies that I can point to about high meat and say, look, there's a study that says this sort of reaction. So yes, but I consume a lot of fermented foods and have for many years, including sauerkraut in the past and all sorts of things. So no idea, to be honest, mate. Is there anything that could reduce the absorption of B12, Harry? I'll tell you one thing that actually can reduce the amount of B12 in your system. Too much folate. So if you were to take a folate supplement, you can burn through quite a bit of your B12. There's a balance between these things. You need enough folate, enough B12, enough B6, and some riboflavin for that pathway. And if you've got the genetic SNP that I have, then you need quite a bit of riboflavin. Like, go for double the RDI, whatever you want to call it. The other way is the other pathway, choline betaine pathway. So support both pathways. So I always say to people, you should get choline-rich foods like things like liver, like organ meats, things like eggs. They're high in choline. So if you have a big steak and a couple of eggs, you will get to about a gram, which most people is fine to deal with homocysteine levels and all that. If you've got high homocysteine levels, you may want to supplement with a bit of choline for a while. It's much safer with the choline pathway. Choline is going to be used by the body. Any excess that it doesn't, it'll get rid of. And it will be used for acetylcholine, good for your brain, good for a whole lot of hormones, good for a lot of things. Plus, it will suppress and normalize, some of the hormonal imbalances. Particularly in men, it can lower prolactin levels and estrogen levels. And in women, it can basically slightly temper down testosterone, or the ratio between estrogen and testosterone, and also lower prolactin, which prolactin is very much involved in male pattern baldness, and the sort of some women suffer as well. The other thing that can do is talk about boron. I did have a question from somebody, and I just need to. Some people say, why? Some people have said, why do I recommend that people go from 12 to 9 to 6 and then to 3 and stay at 3? The reason is the following, because I've been asked why I recommend that, and I haven't actually explained myself. That's an omission from my part, a sloppy omission, let's put it that way. But there is no research for what I'm going to say. There's zero research that really is good. It's only observational in nature, epidemiology. So that's all I'm basing it on. But it actually says that it can affect iodine metabolism to some extent in high doses, boron. And so as a consequence, it may have an effect on, your, thyroid, in a sense, in high doses for a long period of time. And that's why I usually say it's a bit like the selenium thing, where I've said, too high could be a problem, but there's not enough science, but don't take the risk. It's the same thing, the same approach. Do no harm is basically my thing. So, would you normally get 12 milligrams per day in your diet, even if you tried very hard? No, you wouldn't. So is it a good idea to be at such high doses continuously? Probably not. As a short-term intervention to correct a deficiency, and a short-term intervention to suppress these things and normalize your hormones, like I said to Kitty, that's what you do. And then you bring it down, and you bring it down to a level, because 3, within a number of combinations of foods, you can get very easily 3 to 4 milligrams per day. Easy. So at 3, perfect. You don't need to go any higher than that, as a maintenance level, and it's good for your bones as well. Good for mineralization, good for bone health. So it's all round a good at that level. So it's the same thing that I say about a lot of things. Try and get things as much as possible from foods in a much more balanced way. Tuna, great. Selenium level, this, because selenium is involved in the conversion of your T4 or free T4 tyrosine, tyrosinine, it's tyrosinine. Anyway, can't pronounce it properly. And you also need tyrosine for T3 and T4. You need tyrosine, because tyrosine is part of it. With iodine, it combines with iodine and tyrosine, and all that. But at the same time, you need selenium to convert, which I've said this before. You've heard me many times saying this. But also, a lot of people know about selenium, but they don't know that also a minor player in the conversion is zinc. So, zinc plays signaling roles between the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, and stuff like that. But also, it has this conversion effect via your liver and kidneys, in terms of the conversion as well. So that's another part of it. But when you're eating a species appropriate food and you're getting things like a bit of organ meats, you will get these nutrients, so you won't have these problems. You shouldn't have these problems, technically speaking. If you limit yourself to very narrow type of foods, you may end up, depending on your genetics, get some level of deficiencies or more deficiencies. In particular, my case, I have those genetic pathways. That means I can't, convert effectively homocysteine back to methionine. So what I do, I've got two options. One, to improve the folate, B12, B6 pathway, I can add more. As I showed in that study on the little methylation, the first one that I did, the first part one, immediately fixed it in the randomized controlled clinical study. Bang, done, fixed. It's, photo complete. So I have a bit of raw milk, which is very high in riboflavin. So I get my from meat and milk, I get it double or triple the RDA, the recommended daily intake. So it's not an issue. It's resolved that problem. And the choline side, which I usually, because I consume enough eggs and meat, I usually get. It's only when I'm get sick and tired of eggs, as you know, I use my choline supplement. That's why my choline supplement's been sitting there for fucking ages, because it takes me ages to get through it, because I just have it every probably third day, because I get enough in from the diet in terms of one. I sometimes get a 1.5, sometimes even 2 or 2.5 grams of, if I have like quite a few eggs, like I'll do a big omelette of 12 eggs, and I'll end up getting, quite a big dose of choline for that day. So, yeah, so it's basically depends. I mean, don't get too wound up, but at the end of the day, B12 absorption really comes back to a good, liver function. You need the bile, because bile will help to absorb these fats, soluble vitamins, but at the other end, you need good stomach acid. So if you're eating a species appropriate diet, you should have no problems. If you've got a, let's say, H. pylori issue, then you need to get it checked and sorted. It's only people that are consuming too many carbohydrates, become too much fermenters, and keep their stomach acid too high. The pH isn't low enough. They're the ones that are going to have these malabsorption issues. So, if you're having these sort of issues, I don't know, drop me a line and tell me what you're eating, what you're doing and stuff like that. And I'll give you a few tips of what you can do to resolve these things. So, that's the easiest way, because everybody's going to be individualistic. They're going to have some sort of issues. Some people, it's a liver issue. Others, it's a stomach issue. Other is they've had, let's say, they've had some sort of some stomach modification surgery, and that's going to also create issues in itself. A lot of malabsorption of a lot of things, and there you need a completely different protocol each time you eat certain things to be taken in a certain way and all that. So everybody's going to be different in their circumstance, but the majority of people, if they fix the acidity of their stomach, and they don't really have any other problems, things should just normalize. Remember, stomach comes first, everything else is later. You fix the stomach, most other things resolve. The food killed a lot of camp victims. Yep, that's true. Let's move on. Let's move on beyond that sort of stuff. We could talk about the Holocaust for ages, but this isn't a Holocaust site. It is basically a site involved in nutrition. Luke's got something for me, something to laugh. Thank you, Lucas. Oh, that's nasty. That is nasty. Should I show that? Oh, God. Okay. Sorry, Paul. This is one of my supporters. This is uh, now what you should have had him, Lucas. You should have had him in a research lab testing a mouse and saying, "Come on, why are you giving me human results?" Something like that. That would be more appropriate. Yes, I know where you're going with that. Yes, matching the yes. Look, rat studies are not appropriate. Let's put it that way. But look, I like Paul. I sub to Paul. I've got some disagreements with his, poofer sort of things that he relies too much on, these rat studies and stuff like that. But I don't want to be. I don't want us in the carnivore community become too like with Frankie. I don't want this polemic. Because I like Paul. I think he's a good asset to the community. We all have some mistaken opinions about a few things, or we've gone down rabbit holes. For him, it may be, it could be ego, that he doesn't want to lose face, and I can understand that, especially in on the YouTube world. It can be really problematic. I'm probably one of those people who doesn't give a fuck, and that, and if I make a mistake, I usually tell you guys I've made a mistake because I stick to the science. I'm not above the science, So if a piece of research comes out that basically proves to be wrong on some point, I'm going to change because you got to go with the science. But the problem is we've got such poor science in nutrition, such poor science in a number of areas. And so we can extrapolate to the best, by using, logic and applying logic. The most probable reason for this or that may be this, but we always have to say, and I've always said to you guys, challenge me as well, never take anything at face value, even what I say, because none of us basically are godlike authorities. None of us are. We can all slip up, we can all make errors, so we need to basically be aware of that sort of thing. Not a problem, Shell. Thanks for staying around. Enjoy your sleep. Yeah, I better try and find. Oops, it's falling out. I went too far there. Yes. Nothing like deep fried in seed oil. That'll kill your stone in a couple of decades. Kosher pork. Yes, I don't know how you'd make that. It'd be a hard one. Transgenic animal. It's probably the only way you'd be able to do that. I don't know. I mean, some people say that in some parts of South America, probably Polynesian. That's true. The majority did come from the north along the coastline. But let's not forget the same tribal groups that moved into the northeast of the Eurasian continent do have some Polynesian in it as well, because they sort of branched off from that main group that was coming through Central Asia as it moved out of the Middle East and that part of the world, and one branched off into Europe. And so potentially, some similarities there. There weren't many that came across the ocean. I mean, I know it's a new hypothesis that's being touted out there, but it's unproven. And there's not enough archaeological evidence beyond Easter Island and a few other things. Coastal areas, there's just not enough. And even some of the genetics don't match. So I don't think necessarily that is. That's one great thing about genetics. Hard to disprove genetics. He's 8 beers a day too much, Harry. God, mischievous T1. As if you need an answer for that. As if you need an answer. What did I say earlier? I had the equivalent of that in ciders, because it's just easier to consume ciders. I find beer just bloats you. It's just too much carbohydrate. So I can handle the, even though probably beer is probably a bit safer than cider, because cider's got more fructose, so it's probably more harmful to me in terms of glycation. So I've probably glycated myself more and gave myself more alcohol poisoning in that regard, yes, but I enjoyed it. Talk to the hand. Yeah, well, if it was this character, obviously it would have been taken out of context. Obviously that goes without saying. Oh, those are not real tears, believe me. Yes, we all like Shell. Well, the acidity of our stomach, the lowest, it should be around about 1-ish. Research actually shows that it's 1.5. So on average, it's should be around there. This is old research, obviously, but it's still relevant. And this was done, I think, in the 90s. I've shown it before, but I off the top of my head, I don't know where I've got it. Actually, let me just, I'll see where I can find it quickly. Okay, let's just see whether I can find it. Stay in there. Tends to pop out of my ear constantly, which is, oh, God almighty. This is a hilarious moment. Probably Google the damn thing faster. Yep, this is the one. Okay. Just stick that study in there. It's been a long time since I've looked at this. Yep. So that was published online in 2015. It's not the one that I'm actually looking at, but this will do. It was a different study, but this will do as well. So I've seen this study before, but I have shown the older one as well. So, okay, so that's what the study's called. evolution of stomach acidity and its relevance to the human microbiome. I don't agree with a lot of the shit that they come up with, but that's a different issue altogether. In that regard, there's the Homo sapien. As you can see, there's a small intestine. Look how long it is. So, you know, and there's the, you know, off there is where the appendix is. So very minor. They classify us as an omnivore, but that's just shit. That's just a typical crap, you know. We're an obligate scavenger carnivore as far as I'm concerned. So if we look at the figures, and I will zoom in a bit, zoom, and zoom again. Why is that doing it that way? So it won't actually, okay, so it won't actually pull this apart, which is unfortunately. Let's just go to the PDF, which is annoying. Much easier looking at it in the PDF. Usually it's a bit faster than like that. I don't know what's so slow today. Okay. And as we go down, I must have went past humans. You just go slowly through this. Sorry, guys. Ah, there it is. Humans. See, there's the human level, which is 1.5. Okay. So mammalian, primate, humans, Homo sapiens, omnivores, which is wrong, 1.5. So let's look at the other animals that are in that sort of range. So ferrets. We know are generalist carnivores. So generalist carnivores are a bit different than scavengers. They won't eat bad meat or old meat, stuff like that, but they're just generalists. They'll eat anything carnivore, 1.5. Obligate scavengers. The obligate scavengers are 1.5. Facultative scavengers, which is another thing that some people think that humans should be called, but it's another nomenclature, 1.5. So, and similar in some of these regards, and some of the bird types as well, crows. Yeah. So I mean, where you look at dogs and cats, see, cats are 3.6, dogs are 4.5. And the reason for that is because they don't eat high meats or anything like that. And certain animals, certain other omnivores tend to have a bit lower as well. It depends on what they're eating in that regard. So they may have, but the majority of scavengers and carnivores tend to be quite low in that regard. So, the more herbivorous animals tend to be much higher, as you can say. Only the rhino is at similar levels to some other, so they tend to be a bit lower. But the reason why the rhinos, and this is important, why the rhinos and elephants tend to have this lower pH of 3.3, like some of the other omnivores, is because the rhinos actually consume a lot of things in the water, and water tends to have higher levels of bacteria. So you need to kill off that bacteria. And the same thing with elephants. They tend to get into waterways and stuff like that and do consume some stuff in those waterways. And that's another reason why they need to have a slightly better pH, like 3.3. But animals that are basically eat, pretty much, that are scavengers, are very low. All scavengers are basically below 2. There's not a scavenger that isn't below 2. So that's important to understand, that's the sort of the case. And as I said, as we would have evolved, we would have basically first eaten a lot of, like the chimps, killed fresh meat, consumed fresh meat, then potentially hunted smaller little animals and small piglets like the chimps do, and like they do in particular in the savanna environment, like we would have found ourselves early hominins. And as we started getting a stronger taste for meat, we would have started consuming leftovers, which is we would have started to scavenge as well. And that scavenging effect then meant that we really, the people that would survive would be the ones with a lower pH that could survive the scavenging, so they could survive the bacterial issues. So that's another issue. That's why I say, a lot of people say, oh, I've got histamine issues, I've got this issues, I've got that issues. I'm going, have you fixed your stomach? Because if you've got a proper ancestral pH of 1.5, you should not have any stomach issues. Those bacteria should be fucking annihilated in your stomach. Simple as that. So if you don't, you're doing something wrong, or you've got a problem that you need to fix. And until you fix it, things aren't going to be looking good for you. It's, it's sort of similar to that. But this isn't a bad study. I mean, I don't. There's a couple of issues with it. I don't want to get into it at this stage, but in particular, the way they view humans as omnivores. I think that's completely different. The chimps, yes, they are omnivores, but consume a very high animal diet. I mean, the chimps, even the ones that are not in savanna environments. My first video that I did way back about the chimps on Bart K's channel, which talked about the chimps consuming up to a ton of meat a year. So that's a lot of meat, sometimes even higher than some humans consume. So, and it's primarily lean meat because they do use the glycolytic pathways for their muscles and stuff like that. They don't have efficient usage of fat like the females have a bit better because they've got better fat storage. But still, they pretty much consume a lot of meat. So meat was already there. The thing that basically separated us from the chimps and all that was when we started going after animals that were fattier. And as we started scavenging animals, they tended to be also fattier animals. And as we scavenged those animals, not only did our pH come down, but we started consuming more fat. And the more fat we started getting in our diet, that is what created our big brains. It's the fat. So really important for the big brain development. Something that I've, look, either with BART or because there's something I threw out there about I've done one with BART on the brain, and the blood-brain barrier and stuff like that about fats. There's another one that I'm actually thinking of, but whether I do it, I probably will do it with BART. What I'm going to do with PIM is going to be completely different, but I probably will leave it as like a part 2 of what I did with BART, because I chatted with him and I sort of promised that I would do a follow-on, so that will come. So I won't say too much at this stage, because that would be unfair to BART. But I did notice he's actually looking into a few other things, so it's good to see in that regard. No fiber for me. My male stomach is completely flat. Good for you. Exactly. Yes. You want to see distended, bloated stomach? Look at a vegan. They actually, I think Vegan Deterioration did something about Freely, and she basically was chastising people, and she said it's normal to have a bloated stomach, my stomach goes all the way, out. It's normal, all that. I'm going, yeah, exactly. She's a fiber bomb. Three days left for my 10-day fast. Can't wait for getting my teeth into some flesh. Bloody hell. My longest fast has been 6 days. That's the longest fast that I've done. Yes, but don't do them on a regular basis, please. You should just do time-restricted feeding. Give your body a rest, your stomach a rest, your, in digestive system always a rest. You should basically be eating anywhere between 4 and 8 hours a day. You shouldn't be eating all day long. I try to stick to around about 6 hours is my sort of sweet spot. 6, maybe 7 hours sometimes creeps in. If I, especially if, and even when I do go to friends, like I'm going to have let's say an afternoon barbecue or towards the evening, I won't eat anything until the barbecue, deliberately to push the hours out. So I'm not in that regard. So, but that's me. But yeah, do not do on a regular basis. And if you're doing long fasts, remember your immune system becomes suppressed, it will rebuild after your refeed. So you don't want to be going out and putting yourself at risk, especially if it's winter months, because I'm not sure in which part of the world you are, and you could be potentially exposing yourself to respiratory infections and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. So yes, and it's long fast should only be done periodically. They shouldn't be done on a regular basis. On a regular basis, 2 to 3 days, it's fine, because that's what that's closer to traditional what humans did. It just puts too much stress. Even your metabolic rate actually rises for those 3 days, and then after it tapers off a bit, and then it slowly, after at least probably 5 days, then it starts dropping again. So it's not a good thing. The body's sort of struggling in that regard. So it will taper off. It won't drop really low like some people say. No, that's not you're not going to get into hypothyroidism. That's just nonsense. What happens is your levels of reverse T3 goes up, and your TSH actually tapers off, drops. And that's normal. That's what's supposed to happen, because, and that happens from the beginning as you're fasting. So yes, while thyroid is involved in metabolism, it's not the only thing, because as you're fasting in the first few days, your metabolic rate is going up, not down. It's only when you calorie constrict that both your thyroid will go down, your TSH will go up, your thyroid will go down, and you're basically, and that is basically you're starting to induce over chronic periods of time of undernutrition. You can cause this problem of issues with your thyroid, but it's not, by fasting. But if you chronically fast, it can have some issues if you chronically fast. So it's not a good thing to do. But short-term fast and occasionally having a long fast, like I had 6 days, 10 days, isn't a bad thing. But it really clears out a lot of cellular debris and all that. But it's not something to do on a regular basis. The body needs to be fueled. So, but not over fueled, but still needs to be fueled. So we just need to keep those. Look at Harry, not trying to laugh at the comments. Yeah, I don't know how I'm containing myself today. Such self-control, T1. Is it true that those big king shrimps are raised in, unsightly conditions in Asia? Yes, unfortunately. I love local seafood. That is so great. Those troll crabs, OMG, it's too tasty. Look, it depends which parts of Asia. Some parts of Vietnam are an issue, some parts aren't. Some parts of Laos are, some parts aren't. That's the biggest problem with a lot of these countries. You don't know exactly. There are a lot of issues. But even in North America, there's a lot of basically crustaceans and stuff like that have basically people have died from. Bloody hell. Been raining all day. It's still started up again. Fuck. It's pouring out there at the moment. Yesterday it was beautiful, nice and warm. I actually was around. I put some additional clothing on. I went out, and after half an hour, took it all off, and I was carrying it. Got sick and tired. I was with t-shirt and shorts, and today it's pouring out there. Fuck me. Yeah, so yeah, it can be an issue in a lot of these countries in terms of, the quality of the water. Some of it that's being produced in some of these dirty waterways. Yeah, it's all being fished. Yeah, there are a lot of issues. But even, as I said, in North America and parts of North America, there have been places where people have fished and people have been have had bacterial infections or severe ones and actually have died. So, there are many parts of the world, even in the developed world, where there can be issues in terms of that. So, when you look at countries like Australia, New Zealand, and a few other countries, the quality of the seafood, all that is really high. It's the other reason why it's a bit pricier, because it's coming from pristine waters and stuff like that. Or stuff that's coming like, even from Argentina, southern Argentina is pretty good as well. Or southern Chile. Why? Because it's basically in the Antarctic waters, very cold waters, very clear waters. There's not a lot of industrialization in those areas, so there's not a lot of pollution. There's not a lot of agriculture because it's too cold, so there's not runoff and stuff like that. So there's less of these issues in those waters. So some of the snap frozen wild caught stuff from Patagonia and all these sort of areas around that sort of part of the world is also pretty safe. So it's going to be a mixed bag. As I said, in parts of Asia it's fine. In parts of Asia it can be an issue. I would cook crustaceans that I got from those parts of the world. I wouldn't have them raw. Simple as that. So if you want raw foods, you need to get them from really good sources. If you can't get them from good sources, best to basically cook them and kill any potential pathogens. So yeah, that's all I can say on that. Look, I enjoy seafood quite a bit. It's my background, but at the same time, you've got to be very careful about these. We're all human. We all count. Even the veg tards count, even though we like to give them a hard time. But at the end of the day, humans are humans. I'm not into, so yeah. So I completely disagree with you on all that. I'm not going to ban you or anything like that, but I disagree, So please don't put all that nonsense on my channel. Yes, I know. Wear your blue blocking glasses. Change your light bulbs. Not sure what that's about. Maybe it's about the Antifa ones. Not sure. Please elaborate. Is it my weak humor? Okay, sorry. I'll try and improve it. Oh, it's Blinky's. Yeah, it's shit. You could improve it a bit. It's crude, isn't it? T2. It's so crude and rude. It's not sufficient. Let alone, did you see the other one that he put on Bart's stream? Knives and killing, and doing untold nastiness towards, bowerbirds. Horrifying. He's, has poor taste. G'day, Chris. Good to see you, mate. Can I get into calcification ease and ancestral ketosis versus modern day weight loss? Geez, look, as far as the best way to decalcify, it's a combination of things. So one is all the fat soluble vitamins, which I've talked about before. So retinol, vitamin D, and MK4, which is the animal form of vitamin K2. Why? Because these regulate the collagen degrading enzymes. Remember, in your arteries, that calcification is not just calcium, it's basically collagen fibers from the endothelium that basically been pushed out and basically remodeled that whole area to hold all that in, and using calcium to basically stabilize the soft plaquing. So that's what it's doing. So you don't want, and cholesterol's coming in from the back, not from the front, from the back, to basically shore it all up and tie it all together, and that's what it's actually doing. The vitamin E concept has to do with the PUFA. So if you've got, like a lot of people consuming for many years, rancid seed oils and stuff like that, what we need to do is, the problem is, we've stored it. We've got stored PUFA in our fat cells, and also we've got it in our cell membranes. So when we recycle that, we need to fix some of the, we need to do an electron doning from the vitamin E to stabilize those PUFAs. Then the stuff we're releasing in as free fatty acids, and you hear people like Ray Pete and all that going, it's, when you do ketosis, you release all this free fatty acid in terms of PUFA, and you're causing all this inflammation. He's right about that. But his solution isn't any better. Let's throw a whole lot of sugar in there and let's glycate the whole fucking lot. That's the solution. No, it's not. So they don't have a solution. But what you can do is basically, you can deal with it. You can deal with it when you're in a more lower carbohydrate state. You tend to basically upregulate glutathione, which is good, because you want glutathione to keep refreshing the vitamin E, to keep fixing this issue with the free fatty acids. You could also, I did for a while, also add a bit of astaxanthin. Problem with that astaxanthin is, which is that red part around the fish, which stabilizes the fatty acids and refreshes the omega-3 fatty acids. that also can far more less stable because I've got another additional double bond, so triple type bond. So what we need to do is add the vitamin E over that 4 to 6 years to deal with releasing this free fatty acid in terms of the PUFA type that gets in. I mean, it's going to be mixed. It's going to be some saturated, some mono, because we store a lot of mono as well. It's not as, the majority of it, large parts, is far more mono and saturated that's actually stored in fat cells than basically, because the body's quite intelligent. It goes, if you're eating high carbohydrates and you've got excess carbohydrates, what does it do? It says, I'm going to store that excess carbohydrate that I cannot oxidize. We call burning, but oxidizing is what is actually happening at the mitochondrial level. I can't oxidize this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to store it away in the most safest way by turning it into palmitate, which is a stable saturated fat. The 16 carbon one. It'll actually, your lung surfactant, everything, all these sort of things, a lot of your cell membranes are made of it. It's one of the most stable and safest. I know some people do poo-poo palmitate because the body stores it in that fashion when it takes it from carbohydrates or fructose, but it's a good thing that it does because it's a stable form. So when it comes out as free fatty acid, it's not going to basically be damaging to your body or cause inflammation, So where PUFA, on the other hand, can be a problem, and can be a problem even when it's being oxidized or burnt in the normal vernacular that people use, can create far more reactive oxygen species. So it's really important to basically deal with that with the low-dose vitamin E. So that's where the vitamin E comes in. Okay, so the decalcification is a two-pronged attack. One is to initially start transitioning yourself to a low inflammatory diet and go from, a 5 milligram MK4 for, let's say, 6 months, maybe 3 months, depending on where you are. So if you've had a lot of exposure to rancid oils that got a lot of damage, like I had, I started with 5 for a couple of months. I sort of, safer, as a safer option, I say to people, a year, but I did in 6 months. But I won't say that to other people, but I did it myself 6 months. So that's up to you what you want to do. It's not any recommendation. It's what I did. And then after that, I went up to 3 for about a month. I did 15. So I did 3 of those, the Carlson ones, 3 of those tablets. And then later on, I doubled that again. And then I went and got the other ones, which are the 15 milligram doses. And then I started moving up to 45, doing 3 of those every day, and sometimes even doubling that. And so I used that as a decalcification, but that's on a low inflammatory state, doing ketogenic diet, because I was in ketosis at the time for quite a few months, doing these high level of, very low, in a very low inflammatory state, and pulling stuff out. But also I did fasting in between. So pulsatile fasting, a couple of days fasting, then refeeding, fasting, then refeeding. And it's the time when I did my 6-day fast as well. And the reason for that is because you want to clear out the garbage and then repair. Then clear out the garbage and repair in a low inflammatory state. And that's why I say that sort of stuff. I even did statins for a year with a high dose coenzyme Q10 as ubiquinol, the reduced form. And the reason why I sort of initially I did it because my doctor told me when I first came out of the hospital. And then after that, I sort of realized within about 6 to 8 months, but I persisted for a while because I was reading a lot of research, and at the same time, I wasn't sure. I had found one thing, that statins will calcify your arteries even further. But also the effect of the additional calcification has a stabilizing effect on soft plaque. And so if you're in an inflamed state, trying to pull calcification out very rapidly, I thought could be a problem. But since then, I've actually learned from other studies that it's less of an issue. For a long time, we thought, if we pull out with MK4 plaque too fast with vitamin K2, that we're going to leave about a lot of, sort of soft plaque, and that could be a problem. But what we've learned since then, that's not a problem. Usually the body will clear it, and it won't allow the MK4 to remove the plaque. You're likely to decalcify from other parts, like, let's say kidneys may have some kidney stones that will get decalcified. You may have some tartar on your teeth that will get decalcified. In other parts of soft tissue, it will decalcify. But those sort of things, the body's quite smart and intelligent, has stabilized those deliberately, and they will only slowly start decalcifying. And it usually seems that a combination of MK4 and some level of intermittent fasting and stuff like that, and that pulsar seems to get the better results. And that's only anecdotes based on me looking at my heart scans that I did in different periods, where I noticed when I was doing more fasting, it seems to work much better with the MK4 combination of fasting, MK4 sort of combo seemed to work much better. It's probably because I was giving the body enough time to clear some of that shit out as well, at the same time. So I think fasting is an important element in that sort of stuff. And I no longer consider statins as an important stabilizing thing. I did initially, but that was because of poor understanding in the early days. Now I'm a bit wiser. I realize that, really what you want to do is you want to bring the inflammation down, and you want to deal with these things, clearing out the garbage. You're really taking out the garbage. And once you realize that you need to take out the garbage, the other thing that I learned as well is, you need oxygen to get into those areas. You need sufficient oxygen for them to function properly and clear out properly. Now, what's the worst thing you can put in your food? It's fiber. It's plant-based foods. Why? Because they have higher levels of phytosterols. Phytosterols will go into the red blood cells and stiffen them up. They won't be flexible to get through those little crannies, those, areas where both you've got little smaller blood vessels in the heart, or the other thing is, the other thing is where some of the calcification is, and there are some arterial, stenosis in those parts. You still need, red blood cells to sort of pop through there and get oxygen to the other parts. So that's important to get sufficient oxygenation around and these are important things. And I actually looked at myself. I usually, in the old days when I used to check my oxygen levels, I was, much in the lower 90s. Now, they sort of stay up 98, 99, 97 at most, so they really stay at good levels. Why? Because again, it's because I've got rid of the plants. I think the plants are really a problem, especially when you do a sort of one of those, what are they called? The sort of, I know there's a vegan ketogenic diet, there's a plant-based ketogenic diet and all that. When you have a lot of these phytosterols in there, I think they're a problem as well as part of the solution. That's why I probably noticed in the early days, in the early years when I was doing keto and eating a lot of vegetables, all I got out of them was kidney stones and more issues than you can poke a stick at. And as I started slowly reducing the amount of plants, because I got sick and tired of them, I didn't like them, and reducing my salads and all the sort of things, I noticed feeling better. I didn't go immediately to the carnivore diet. I sort of transitioned over time and sort of just got rid of more plants and sort of nearly ended up quite highly carnivorous without really adopting. And it's only when I saw on the Joe Rogan, I saw, Sean Baker, and I go, oh, this sounds interesting. I'll give this a try. The last vestiges of plants, I'll just jettison the whole lot, and, which was very little at that stage. So it's all these sort of things. And I think it's really important that, it's a stage approach. Yeah, you don't need statins. That was my mistaken understanding at the time. In a highly inflammatory state where you're constantly putting shit out there, a statin probably does help some of these people on a SAD diet to some extent. One, it's got an anti-inflammatory. It's very low. I mean, even aspirin has got more of an anti-inflammatory effect than statin. So it's very minor. We're talking about 1%. We're talking about crap, and it's got a lot of damaging to your mitochondria problems that it causes, coenzyme Q10 and all that. At the end of the day, it's really harmful if you do it long term. And the calcifying effect is actually worse because, the body knows how much calcium to put into to stabilize damage to your arteries. This excess accumulation that you get is basically actually makes the problem worse. And so, and that's why statins are even worse in that regard, because they do calcify you. There's one thing that if you ask one of those people that are in radiology or whatever, that do x-rays and scans and all this sort of stuff for people, I did ask one, and he said, people that have been on statins for a very long time, they can't tell you this sort of stuff openly, but I know people in this sort of area, even, that work in the medical system. Even my cousin's actually a doctor. The other one's actually a farmer, works for a multinational as a pharmacist, So I know people in the industry, in that regard, but they can't officially talk about things, obviously. But yeah, sort of calcification crap is an issue with statins. So it makes the problem worse. And it takes then longer to decalcify if you've been on the damn things longer. I suspect that my decalcification would have happened a bit quicker than it did because my earlier scans, I wasn't really getting much traction, where my latest scan in January that I did, no scarring, zero scarring in my blood vessels, in my heart. They could find zero scarring. So I had no scarring, which was fantastic. Good blood perfusion and some regression as well. So, and it's really hard because it's not like a CAC scan. It's basically a different type of scan where they're actually looking at the blood vessels, how well they dilate, how big they are. So that's the thing with a CAC score. CAC will tell you you've got calcium, but it won't tell you how the morphology of it. Is it calcium that's really thin around those blood vessels, or is it thick? Quite thick. In a sense, protruding out quite a bit. It's really hard from the angle, depending on the angle that it's been taken as well. That's another issue. So if you've gone and done a CAC scan, you need the operator to have your file and look at exactly how it was done and put you in the same position and do the scan the same way at the same part. So because a different angle will give you a different result. There are issues with it. It's important to know what your calcium arterial calcification score is, but at the same time, there are issues with, some of the accuracies and all that. Where this other scan that I did takes a fucking long time. You're in the machine for nearly 40 odd minutes. Scan, nearly fell asleep. But anyway, but the thing is, what it does is it's looking at the heart actually working. It's actually a scan of the heart. Actually, it's functioning, so they can actually see it functioning. If they can see whether it's not working properly somewhere, or it's misfiring, or it's not, so they can actually see the actual structure of right through the heart and the blood moving through in a dynamic way, and that tells you more. That's more detail because it actually tells you, is the heart perfusion working properly? Is it getting oxygen in properly and out? The waste products, is it working properly and functioning? That's more important in a sense, where the CAC score will tell you you've got a risk, but then you need to do one of these other scans, which are even more important. See, I didn't do a CAC score because it was useless. I knew that I had calcification, so it wasn't going to tell me much. I wanted to know now, what condition was my heart in? That means, Was there any more scarring there, or had the scarring resolved? Was I getting enough oxygen into the heart? Was the heart functioning properly? You know, it was. I mean, when I get up in the morning and check, you know, before my cortisol goes up, it's usually basically about 60 beats, per minute or stuff like that. Sometimes even lower nowadays. If I do a lot of exercise, it can drop even lower, stuff like that. But it's the sort of stuff that I'll show you next week or tonight. I'll actually bring my mobile phone here and I'll do it. So yeah, ask me again. But yes, so in that regard, I don't have Bart here. He's fucking sick. Sick as a dog. And doesn't seem like we're going to get Jared here either. Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. And they still haven't, unfortunately. But, I think we can go back to everybody's history. We've probably all got bad skeletons, in our closets. So many indiscretions and things that we have done, which are probably inappropriate. Yes. The rodent stuff. I see you guys are very popular with rodents. That's good. It's good. I'm happy that you love rodents. Oops, I just went past. Pick. What's T1 asking? Harry, any thoughts of short period? Can't really tell you, mate. Can't really tell you. I haven't looked into it, so I can't really tell you. Is there any need that you need? That's any stuff? I mean, stick to food, guys. Stick to food. It's only when you're actually dealing with some sort of deficiency. So, there's a lot of stuff out there that you probably don't need. Carnivorous chimps. Can you imagine piglets getting choked out and pulled in half by a chimp? They are extremely powerful animals. Exactly. They are. Up to a ton of meat a year. And now those little fuckers in the savannah region have actually learned to hunt properly with spears, building their own spears, primarily the females, because the men are freaking selfish little pricks and they won't share as much. But they are more, look, they have changed their behavior as well. They are more work as a group. The males usually used to spread out, go and hunt on their own, try to get the best pickings, so to speak, with some of their mates and all that. But now as a group, they sort of come together like a tribe. They work together. They are more empathetic. They're less involved in thieving as well. So some of the empathetic genes are upregulated. So there's a lot of changes that are happening, both biologic, but also mental, the mental sort of state, a lot of things. So it's quite interesting. It's an insight on how potentially we may have evolved from that common ancestor as well. You're welcome, mate. You're welcome, as always. And thanks for your support as well, all the stuff you put on here, because it's good and entertaining. Yep. See you, mate. Yes. Oh, few kisses there. It's a bit mixed messaging, T1. Mixed messaging. Not a problem. Yes, very much mixed messaging, my lad. He's all loving. Yes, he does. He does. You know, a bit more love. Cool, Harry's still alive. Yeah, always can't get the coolness out of me. Yeah, so I'm a bit of a tease. I like to tease people, you know. So I'm a bit of a. Oh, look, I take it back as well. I'm not. It goes both ways. I'm very easygoing. I think humor is really important in both amongst people and relationships. Really important. When we take things a bit too serious, yes, not a good thing for life. Problems are always going to be there and can be dealt with in a much more calmer way. Hello. Good to see you, Nick Kitty. One other thing I did mention earlier. I hope you're down to your 3 milligrams of, your boron supplement. I hope you've come down. You're not at the higher levels. And if you are on the higher levels, do up your, don't stay on them for too long, please. But if you think you need to stay a bit, just, because it can affect iodine metabolism a bit. So add a bit more, get iodinized salt and add a bit of additional iodine, but please don't stay on for too long in that regard. So hopefully that's sort of improved your sort of hormones, your estrogen hormones better, I hope. Just let me know if it has, if you've seen better results, because that's what the studies say, but that's all I can go on in that regard. That they basically normalize hormones for postmenopausal women, and they usually improve testosterone for men. So Flappers is quite happy about that. He's jumped on the other bandwagon, the L-citrulline, for better vasodilation, to get more hard-ons. He's happy about that as well. No, I've never had a CAC score. No, I've done all the other sort of tests, but never a CA. Look, had I never known where I was, I probably would have done out of curiosity. But I can't see forking out $250 for something I already know that I'm going to have some level. The most important thing is my calcium in there stable? It is, and it's reducing since the previous scan. Is basically the blood perfusion really good? It is, and I can see that from all the other indicators that I pointed out earlier. Is there sort of zero scarring that they've actually noticed on the scan? Yes, there is. So what more is there? So I think a CAC score is a very good thing for people to do if they don't know where they're at. If they can get it with their doctors done, and potentially cheaper in some way. Yep. But I actually tried with my doctor, but told me, nah, look, cardiologist said you're going to do the other scan. That's what you're going to do. And I didn't have to pay anything for it. It was free from via the Royal Hobart Hospital in Hobart. So, it's a public hospital. You go in, they have the part which is the outpatients sort of clinic. And I went to the outpatients clinic. I just had to wait there for about 20 odd minutes. Then I was into the scanner, so, and prior to that, I'd actually done, I think it was, I can't remember how many days earlier, I had to do a sort of a repeat of, get on the treadmill. They put all the stuff on, and they check where your heart is to see that there are no irregular sort of heart blips, electrical, electrically the heart's working properly, and that was fine as well. So it all looked good. Then I did the scan, that all looked good. So, I'm happy with that, and I'll keep to what I'm doing. I've been doing more or less low carbish in the last decade, and fasting and low carbish, and it seems to be doing the trick. So, how much one factor is affecting more than other factor? Fucked if I know. That's really hard to ascertain because of the sheer fact that you would need Star Trek technology to be able to literally scan and continually scan the body and seeing where all interactions are happening. There are environmental effects. There are all sorts of things. If somebody's in a polluted environment, or they've got other factors that could be inflaming them or whatever, there could be so many multiple factors why somebody's healing slower than somebody else. It can be complicated. Hey, Harry, how problematic is 1/4 teaspoon of raw honey? Not really, not a problem. That little, no. It'd be like putting a bit in your tea and having it. Yeah, we're talking about here large amounts, and what some people are saying, using it as a prime carbohydrate. There are other safer carbohydrates because, the glycating effect of between, I know a lot of people use the sort of like the load, and that's sort of discern, because it's basically, glucose 0.6 or whatever, and it's not that, it's really the glycating. There's a glycating index of different types of things, and really the glycating effect of fructose, and this is in different experimental animals, is very the same. Fructose is 7 times higher than, so it's not the threshold in terms of how many fold, that's much lower, but the actual glycating effect itself, that means the way it actually, its stickiness, so to speak. How sticky is it? That's probably a better word to use. It's glycating, its stickiness is 7 times higher than glucose. That's why you can consume, basically, let's say, 7 times the quantity of glucose to get the same effect from that you would get from fructose. So that's the sort of stuff. That's the sort of stuff we're saying, in a sense. But very small amount, not going to be an issue. When I've got a sore throat, I sometimes use Manuka honey, put it in a bit of tea, and have that in the evening. So, and I've actually even put a bit of honey into warm milk, and that's really nice. But we're talking about here massive quantities, or large quantities, or having like 100 grams or 200 grams of, raw sugar. I'd rather say, if somebody really was freaking desperate to have some level of sugar, I'd steer them towards rice. I'd say, go and have some rice is way preferable, or something like, let's say, pumpkin, than basically as a starch, rather than, or tapioca sort of flour or something like that, rather than basically, fructose, large amounts of honey or large amounts of sugar cane or anything like that. It's just not a good thing, the stickiness. And in particular, because we are not barefoot like we used to be. See, when you're barefoot, you have less stickiness, but also you increase the negative charge in your arteries on the glycocalyx. And so you create a much stronger negative charge, which makes it more difficult for things to stick. When you're basically sedentary, or you don't earth yourself, you don't move yourself around, because also movement, exercise, things like that, also reduces platelet aggregations or stickiness it increases nitric oxide synthesis, which actually also increases the amount. It's not only the vasodilation that actually is happening, but also it's actually increasing the negative charge along the endothelial, the little glycocalyc hairline structures that are all aligning it to keep things from sticky, because all the other lipids and stuff like that have a negative charge on their pericellular matrix, their hairline structures. And so negative, less stickiness. But when you stick a lot of sugar molecules on these lipids, they can become more sticky, So it's a lot of things. It's a combination of, to reduce the stickiness, so to speak, which is important. So movement is important. Reducing the amount of foods, in particular, if you're sedentary, it's like putting a bullet to your head nearly by having highly glycating foods. So, and this is why somebody that's an athlete, that's doing certain things, that's moving more, and having a bit of sugar is going to be far less detrimental, and possibly in many cases will just be used before it even gets a chance to too much glycation. So that's the resident time in the bloodstream as well. So if you're highly inflamed and you've activated the Randall cycle and you've got less capacity to take in some of these nutrients, they're going to be circulating and glycating far more. So it's all nuanced in that regard as well. But I wouldn't get too wound up with a bit of honey. We're talking about quantities of honey here that Paul and others have been promoting. That's where the sort of difference is in that regard. Yes. So I've also found that O2 saturation improves when you, as well, exactly. All these sort of things happen. When it comes to, on the other side, like oxygen therapy, there are some benefits, but I would say I'm always wary when people want to throw too much stuff. It's like, people that talk about NAD, that I talk about as well. You've heard me talk about NAD. I'm going to be interesting to see what I may have to basically subscribe to his basically Patreon thing just to see what the fuck, or ask him to send me a copy so I can actually see what he actually puts there in that regard. But I suspect he will be critical of both NMN and some of the other stuff like NR and stuff like that. He'll focus on foods, a bit like I do with nice and rich foods like tuna, like things like pork and stuff like that. That's higher in niacin and stuff like that. Those sort of things. I hope he does. And when it comes to pure niacin, like the pharmaceutical grade, as I've always said to people, do not go over 300. High dose niacin is bad. It basically affects your mitochondria in a negative way. It it's supercharged. It just puts too much strain on that whole redox system. So it's not a good thing on one hand. On the other hand, there's another issue, which also, it can actually affect gluconeogenesis and lipolysis. It can interfere with cholesterol as well. So it can be negative. And this is why, remember a couple of weeks back when somebody said that they were taking, 1,000 milligram doses or 1 to 2,000, I said, that's just too high. It's dangerous. I mean, my dose is around about 100 because I snap the dose and I do it half. Like the 250 that I was doing in the past, I've sort of dropped down to doing 125, which is the half dose. So, and now I'm trying to find one of a dose down to 50 because I think that's a long-term, much more viable level to be at around about 50. We don't need this massive level anyway. And as you're getting older, you're fighting against, CD38 as well. So you can't even utilize as much. So that's the other thing. So, but the nice thing about niacin is the only thing that both increases NAD and decreases CD38, which is a good thing. But like anything, too much isn't a good thing. So that's another side to the coin. But it's also very important that you maintain good levels of energy in the future. Why? Because remember, as we get older, we get more senescent cells, more damaged cells, more debris. And it's a constant fight between damage and repair. And damage wins out in the end. So if we can maintain good levels of energy, we can do more repair and remain younger, more youthful in our older age. And that's important, so it's probably something that I've said multiple times. Yep. Aura ring data, heart rate. Yeah, wouldn't waste my money. Look, I'm not saying that, I'm not bagging that they're unimportant, but I wouldn't personally waste my money. If you're eating species appropriate diet, doing the right things, doing some exercise, doing some weightlifting, you should be fine. If you're sleeping appropriately, your blue blocking glasses, and all that, and I'm going to get my new light bulbs. Those are the things that are far more important to do. Way more, yes. Only negative I'm trying to is electrolytes. Pissing more at night and some palpitations when in bed. Not enough salt, mate. I never get up at night. I sleep right through. So the only time I actually get up at night, if I've been on the booze, so, and I forgot to go to the toilet before I went to bed. So that's the only time I've got up. But no, look, remember last time that I said that the best way to actually reset your electrolytes is basically, you can do it two ways. There's a couple of supplements you can actually get, electrolyte supplements. Let me see if I can find my links to it. Oops. Jared just sent me an email saying that he's going to be here next week. Okay, so he's basically he actually forgot. So it's just one of those things. Oops. And let me share. Oops, not that one. Wrong one. And that is an electrolyte, which has got potassium. That one there. So you can see, and so you could probably up your potassium levels with that. 1 scoop is enough. Don't go over that. And a bit of magnesium, and then up your sodium. Because remember what I said? You've got the gradient, the sodium and potassium pump. If you've got more sodium on the outside, it's going to keep everything in. You're not going to be dumping electrolytes. And initially, if you put the salt up, what we'll actually do is, because of its osmotic effect on actual water, you'll initially, if you've got a bit too much salt, what will happen is your body will start dumping fluid and then will stabilize. And that's what you want it to stabilize, and then, keep your sodium levels slightly. You're always getting a bit of potassium and magnesium from your food to just top up, because you only lose a very small amount every day. So if you're getting enough from the food and you're keeping it in because you've got enough sodium, people didn't have an issue in the past. They consumed 10, before refrigeration, 10 times the sodium. I put plenty of a lot of salt on my food, and I even have in my water, even this water here, it's got a bit of salt in it. So I've never had heart palpitations. My heart rate's always at the low end. Sometimes it can be down to the 50s and 45 or whatever if I'm really being athletic. But most of the time, like this morning, it was basically 58. So, just give me a sec. Where's my old stuff? Oop. Hold on, I'm still trying to friggin' find it. Nope. I can't find the damn thing. But look, tonight, because I've got the other one, we will show you tonight in that regard. And because we're way over the limit in time, I'm not going to try and actually find it now. Let's quickly go through this because I have to sign off because I won't have enough. Remember, I've got five days this 5 Sundays. So yes, so let's just So you need to sort out your electrolytes, and you need to up your sodium to keep that stuff in. That's good. Yeah, but don't stay too high on the boron for too long. Life has been busy, been forgetting to take the boron most of the days this week. I think it helped some, but not much. Okay, but you didn't go through the protocol. You need to go through the 12, then 9, and every day you need to take these doses because you need to suppress, to normalize these hormonal things. You need to suppress the prolactin levels. You really need to go hard on them. So You need to go back and do 12 for about 2 weeks, and then 9 for about 2 weeks, and then 6, and then down to 3. So you need to do it on a daily basis. That's how the research was done to suppress these things. So anyway, that's on that. Yep, not a problem. Yep, exactly. Yep. Look, I know, but a small amount isn't going to kill you. But that's why I say to people, honey is quite glycating. It's not a food. It was used for medicinal purposes for the majority of people. It wasn't used as a food. That somebody could be promoting it in our community as a food it's wrong. So it's a bit of a problem. Okay, about the glycation, preparation, non-grounded world, herbal supplements such as bilberry. Yeah, look, they're not too bad. Milk thistle is one that I've actually promoted for liver health for a lot of people for a long time. So that's another one in that regard. Yep. Especially one of the biggest issues is the FXR enzyme in the liver. Really important to basically, milk thistle is one of the most important there for that purpose, to sorting that out, normalizing things in the liver with your enzymes. Cool. I think a month, my schedule shouldn't be in chaos. Okay, fair enough. Look, if things are all over the place in your life and all that can be a problem. I can understand, sometimes even I don't comply to my rules. We're all human. And sometimes I sort of fall off the wagon and all that. And then I sort of have to go, oh shit, need to do this. I've sometimes tried to do like a reset for my, like a fasting 3-day fast, try to do 80 hours. And sometimes I fall off the wagon and something comes up and I just don't complete to reset my immune system and, before the winter months. And I go, I really feel bad about it. But then, we're all human. So I understand. Not a problem. It's okay. No need to, we're not the carny police here. We're just normal people, and it's just how we can help each other, get information out, and try and actually, as a community, a bit of humor, and also resolve some of our issues, or try to as much as possible. If we can reduce, issues for people a bit, even a bit is better than nothing. Anyway, guys, it's been great. I'm going to be back on in about, about nearly less than 4 hours from now. So I've got another, it probably won't be as long. It'll probably only be about 2 hours and all that. So if you've got any really, at that stage, of people in the Australasian region, you've really got things that you really want to ask, just have your questions ready to go. So, because it will be a shorter time frame, unfortunately. It's just, so it'll only be 2 hours because nearly 4 hours this one. So I'll be cutting my own throat in a sense in terms of hours that I've got available for the next Sundays, which is the issue. Not a problem, T1 and T2. Love you guys. You're my best trolls, carny trolls. See you guys. Thanks. Appreciate it. Take care. And I will see some of you in about 4 hours' time. See yous.